Hello and welcome to New Brunswick Votes 2020. I'm Harry Forestell, and the polls in this province have just closed in what is already a historic election. It is the first in Canada to take place amidst a pandemic. We're going to find out tonight what impact that has had on voters and politicians through the campaign. But first, welcome to viewers from across the country joining us on CBC News Network, through CBC Radio, and online tonight through a host of media platforms. It's great to have you aboard as New Brunswick considers its options. Blaine Higgs and the Progressive Conservatives have had nearly 2 years in government to convince voters they deserve a shot at a second term and a majority government. Minority rule has been a short leash for the former engineer. This time, Blaine Higgs wants the full enchilada. Well, we have our reporters at each of the party headquarters waiting to bring us the latest reaction to the returns. Connell Smith is with the Progressive Conservatives. He's in Quispam-Sis tonight. In Fredericton, Maeve McFadden is over at Liberal headquarters. Hadil Ibrahim is with the Green Party. Shane McGee at the People's Alliance. And Gary Moore with the New Democrats tonight. So throughout the night, we'll be keeping track of who's leading and elected in each party. So if you're watching, you'll see those numbers across the bottom of your screens. And if you're listening via CBC Radio, I'll read them out to you as they change. We're just moments now from getting the first returns in this snap election. We have two veteran reporters tonight to help explain those returns and what they mean for you and for this province. Jacques Poitras is CBC New Brunswick's provincial affairs reporter, and Rachel Cave is a senior reporter and host here at CBC. Welcome to you both. Jacques, let me begin with you. A snap election, I mentioned it. How did we get here and why?
Well, no one won a majority 2 years ago. Blaine Higgs and the PCs took office and survived through to this year, but with the support of the People's Alliance, one of the smaller parties. But in February, they lost a minister through a resignation because of a botched hospital reform, and suddenly Higgs needed two other parties to support him, so his grip on power was tenuous. Then COVID-19 happened. He put together an all-party committee to oversee the response to the crisis. That worked reasonably well, but as time wore on, partisan differences and philosophical differences started to emerge. The other parties started to disagree, and the Premier said, I want an agreement, a plan to not trigger an election for 2 years so that I can be assured of stability to keep managing this crisis. The Liberals pulled out of those talks, and Higgs called an election looking for that majority, that stability that he says he needs.
Well, the path to power, we'll see how far along that path he gets tonight. Rachel Cave, where are voters' heads right now, given everything else that's going on?
Well, as you know, students have just gone back to school, and in some ways people are really holding their breath, worried about some kind of COVID resurgence. We see cases tick upward in Ontario and BC. People are very fearful of a crushing economic shutdown. They're conflicted. They want their freedoms back. It has been so hard to have borders closed. We saw especially the communities bordering Quebec, how difficult that was for them. But people are also afraid of opening up too fast. So when Blaine Higgs says, give me a majority and I will deliver stability, that just may be a message that resonates with voters.
Well, we're going to find out tonight whether it did or not. Our reporter Jennifer Sweet is in Tracadie tonight, keeping an eye on how things are playing out in the north of the province. And Jen, the north went pretty solidly Liberal last election, bar a single riding. What's the view from where you are tonight?
Harry, I had a chance to visit a couple of ridings this afternoon that tend to go back and forth between the Liberals and the PCs. Shippagan Lemec-Miscou was won by Robert Gauvin for the PCs in 2018. Of course, he left the party last winter over those proposed reduced hospital emergency room hours, and he's not running in that riding this time around. But we did hear from some voters coming out of the polling station there that protecting health care services is still a very important issue for them. They also talked about protecting linguistic rights, and another project that's high on their list is a new bridge for Shippagan. And Blaine Higgs was in the area campaigning on Saturday, and we're told that people maybe didn't hear the commitment that they were quite hoping for on the bridge project, so that could hurt the PC candidate in that riding. Meanwhile, here in Tracadie, things seem like they might be a little bit different. We're hearing that a lot of voters coming out of the polling stations are talking about saying that they like the PC candidate here, Deanne Carey. We're in front of her headquarters right now. We'll be looking to speak with her a little bit later to see how she feels her campaign went. Her supporters are going to be heading over to a local restaurant shortly to see the results come in, and we'll be heading over there as well.
All right. I don't know if that was Blaine Higgs in the car that just went by. I presume not. I'm sure
we are on the main drag here.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Jennifer, thank you for that. Jennifer Sweet in Tracadie, keeping an eye on ridings in the north. Rachel Cave, you've kept a closer eye on some of those northern ridings. Hard work for Blaine Higgs to break into those ridings for a number of reasons. Tell us about that.
Well, you heard Jennifer there, since Robert Gauvin took an exit from the peninsula as Blaine Higgs' only Francophone deputy, he really hasn't had any representation in the majority Francophone ridings. He hasn't had any blue in the north, and this linguistic divide is something that he says he is interested in representing all of the province. But we haven't seen him make any overtures to Francophones in the way that some Acadians are looking for example. No promise for a standing committee on the Official Languages Act. No spending that might kind of smooth over some differences. And nothing in his platform about language rights or culture except a promise to hit a target for Francophone immigrants. So it'll be interesting to see if he can cross over into northern New Brunswick tonight.
Well, we're about to see the start of it right now, because here we go with 7 ridings in which the Progressive Conservatives are leading or elected. There's Albert with a well-known Progressive Conservative in the lead there.
Mike Holland, Minister of Natural Resources and Energy Development, in a lead with 147 votes over the People's Alliance Sharon Buchanan, with 1 of 21 polls reporting.
Rossay coming up as well. Rachel, you know this riding?
Yes, this is Ted Fleming is the incumbent here for the Progressive Conservatives, Health Minister. He is in the lead, 175 votes over Jason Hickey, the Liberal candidate.
All right, and we have Fundy the Isles.
Fundy the Isles, St. John West. This is Andrea Anderson-Mason, the incumbent, the Justice Minister and Attorney General, in a lead of 132 votes over Liberal Tony Mann, with 1 of 23 polls reporting.
And the NDP on the board with that one.
Sharon
It'll be interesting to see how long that lasts. Just a quick review, and then we're going to go to Jacques for some more returns. Well, there's St. Croix there. But the PC's leading or elected in 13 versus the Liberal 6. Jacques?
Yeah, so this is the St. Croix riding where Kathy Baucus is running for the PCs. This was the riding of Greg Thompson, who died during the last term. The People's Alliance has a strong candidate there, Rod Cumberland, who's well known, and he's in second place right now, but a big lead for Kathy Baucus.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's Carlton York.
Richard Ames is the executive assistant to Carl Urquhart, the Minister of Public Safety. So Ames would have seen a lot of the COVID-19 meetings up close as Urquhart's assistant, and that's a comfortable lead for him in Carlton York, a lead of 274 votes. With
the People's Alliance candidate in second place there.
Now here's Victoria-Lavallee, where Liberal Chuck Chasson is leading Roland Michaud. Of course, Roland Michaud is the candidate who was disavowed by the PC campaign, but remained on the ballot as a PC because it was too late to change, but essentially running as an independent. Right now, Chuck Chasson is ahead by 228 votes. The PCs had been counting on this riding until this fiasco happened.
All right. Well, here we are, the Progressive Conservatives leading or elected in 16 ridings, the Liberals in 11, catching up a bit there, the Green Party on the board with 2, and the People's Alliance with 1. So it has started. A lot of these votes are early votes that have been dumped into the system, so we'll get a better, more thorough understanding as the night progresses. Right now, let's check in with Terry Segay. He's standing by with the guests. Terry.
Yeah, now we're having fun, aren't we? It has been mentioned at least once tonight that this is the first general election in Canada during a pandemic. And my first guest this evening is in a good position to address that. Dr. Suzanne Hindmarch is an associate professor of political science at UNB, but her research interest is global health policy. Good evening, Dr. Hindmarch. Welcome to the program.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us. What was your reaction when you heard New Brunswickers were going to go to the polls in a pandemic?
Well, I mean, in some respects, it was not surprising. As we've already seen, this was a minority government. They're a little bit more unstable, and we did have those empty seats for the by-election. Certainly, surprise at the tight timelines, the very short timelines, and the timing in terms of not only in the middle of a pandemic, but also right at the beginning of a school year. And then obviously, as a health researcher, this is a really interesting and terrible natural experiment in how you have an election during a pandemic. How do you do that safely? How do you do that equitably? And how do you do that in a way that ensures full and democratic participation?
How did the pandemic affect the campaign?
Well, in a lot of ways. So on both the voter side and on the party side, I think on the party side, obviously, the candidates were not able to get out and door knock and go door to door. So it certainly affected how they were able to go about campaigning. As I mentioned, that really short timeline meant that I think especially some of the smaller parties really struggled to round up viable candidates and vet them and get them launched in that short period of time. And it also obviously affected the platforms and the sort of messaging that the parties chose to campaign with.
Professor Hindmarch, I thank you for your time. Thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Harry, back to you.
Thanks very much. Terry Segay there. We'll be back to him a little later in the program. We have our first elect tonight. It comes from Gagetown. Ross Wetmore, elected with a substantial lead there. 19 out of 30 polls reporting. That is the first elect on the board for tonight with the PCs. And just to get a look at how things are working out here, let's look at the vote share. It tells 42.3%. They need 42.7% generally, Jacques, for a majority government, and they are just a hair's breadth away from it. The Liberal vote doesn't seem to be doing as much.
No, and that Liberal vote is so concentrated as well in certain parts of the province that it's hard for the Liberals to get very far in seats with that kind of a vote. Look at the People's Alliance, though, at 10.7%. Yeah. I mean, they were below that in most of the polling during the campaign. So this is, if it holds, is a bit of a surprise for them and could indicate more strength than a lot of people thought they had during the campaign.
Here's a look at how that is having an impact on the seat change. The PCs needed 3 seats to gain a majority. They're having exactly that happen right now. The Liberals are down 5 seats. So one would presume that the Green Party is eating into their vote share. The People's Alliance down 1 seat, but nonetheless are on the board with 2. So 43 ridings reporting so far. So this is a really good first taste or first sample of what we're going to see happen tonight. There are a few ridings, Jacques, that will be coming in a little late, right? 5 ridings?
Yeah, we have 5 ridings where polling hours were extended at some polling stations only because there were some technical problems. Bathurst East, Nipisiguit, St. Isidore, Caracat, Moncton South, Fredericton South, and Carleton, but those delays are very brief, anywhere from 9 to 30 minutes. There was also some talk this afternoon at Mount Allison University, some students being wrongly denied the right to vote because of their eligibility moving back to campus. The Students Association talked to Elections New Brunswick and resolved that and has told students to go back, and try again before 8 p.m.
All right, Rachel Cave, take a look at this next riding. This is Miramichi, of course, the riding for Kevin Vickers, the Liberal leader.
Yeah, early in the night, Kevin Vickers is trailing Michelle Conroy with the People's Alliance. The margin there is 72 votes, Michelle Conroy ahead. Of course, Kevin Vickers really wants this seat. I mean, he has sat outside the legislature since winning the leadership by acclamation, been at the table as part of that COVID committee, but he would certainly like to be in the House. But we'll see how the evening progresses.
Well, let's check Fredericton Grand Lake right now to see what's happening for Chris Austin, and a substantial lead there, 360 votes over Roy Wiggins of the Progressive Conservatives.
Yeah, actually, some of those numbers are a bit small. 860 votes is the margin there. Yeah, Chris Austin is the People's Alliance Party. He would have to hold, if he were not leading there tonight and he doesn't get get elected there. That's another conversation for tomorrow.
This is quite a break out of the blocks for the Progressive Conservatives, leading or elected in 27 ridings, the Liberals leading or elected in just 17, the People's Alliance in 2, and the Greens in 2. But boy, this is really breaking Blaine Higgs's way in terms of these opening votes.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he's now 2 above what he needs for a majority. So really, he's well, there now it's 28. So yeah. he's in a good position. This is the upper range of what the PCs were hoping for.
Let's bring Eric Grenier in. He is our CBC poll specialist, and he's joining us from Ottawa. And Eric, these numbers are quite impressive for the PCs. This is essentially the story that was told by early polls, right?
Absolutely. The polls at the beginning of the campaign did have the PC somewhere over 40% of the vote. And I think what we're seeing is some of that linguistic divide that we had seen in the polling, that the Liberals were holding a lead of about 30 points or so among Francophones. And in the majority Francophone ridings, we are seeing that the Liberals so far have that kind of advantage in the popular vote. But in those majority Anglophone ridings, the PCs won those by about 10 percentage points in 2018. If we're looking at the margins now, it's something more like 30 points. So it's suggesting that the PCs are really making those inroads in southern New Brunswick, while the Liberals are holding their Francophone vote. That Anglophone vote in the southern portion of the province is really going to the PCs, and it's what's delivering them right now enough seats that puts them in that majority territory if they can hold on to them.
It's going to be a tough night for them, no question about that. The Green Party right now leading or elected in 4 seats, and the People's Alliance leading or elected in 2, but the real story is this burst out of the blocks by Blaine Higgs and the Progressive Conservatives, leading or elected in 26 seats and leaving the Liberals, at this point at least, in the dust. 17 ridings they are leading or elected in, and all ridings are now reporting, so they are all in play. But boy, there's going to be a lot of blue on that map behind me. Let's take a look at a couple more seats that are reporting. Have we got? No. Well, we'll just carry on. For the Liberals to gain ground in this, especially in the southwest corner of the province, Rachel, how tough was that going to be for them? How embedded are the Progressive Conservative votes there?
Well, they're very much so. I mean, there's ridings in, especially around St. John and in the southern portion of New Brunswick that have been Conservative for like 4, 5 elections, and they haven't really moved. And you know, the Liberals had some Conservative ridings that really don't want to see big spending and are wary of big projects. So that's been one of the issues that Kevin Vickers hasn't been able to sell himself there.
Well, here we are just barely 18 minutes into the returns, and the CBC Decision Desk is ready to make a projection. That projection is for a Progressive Conservative government. Blaine Higgs has achieved what he wanted, or is in the process of achieving what he wanted with the Progressive Conservative government. It's still too early. We don't have enough votes in yet to determine whether this will be a majority or a minority government. But Blaine Higgs on the path to power, as I said earlier, a significant gain in votes for him. 25 ridings needed to go blue, PC blue. Right now, the party is leading or elected in 26. And if this continues, Jacques, this will be the first time in 17 years that a sitting government has won another term.
That's right. Bernard Lord in 2003 saw his vote really take a beating and just hung on for a second mandate. Blaine Higgs is doing the opposite. He's gaining seats to get to a second mandate, but it has been a long time. We've had this period of instability where we've moved back and forth, Liberal PC, Liberal PC. It's really these third parties that have made the calculation a lot more complicated. So 26 seats isn't a huge majority, but it is a majority, and Blaine Higgs is going to take it.
All right, let's have another look at the vote share to give you an idea of just how strong this is at this point. 39.8% of the vote. 42.7 is generally necessary for majority government, but the PCs have really made efficient use of their votes. Clearly, they're gaining seats, even though they're only 6 points ahead of the Liberals. Here's the seat change. They're up 4 seats. They only needed 3 to get back as a majority government. The Liberals losing 3 seats and the People's Alliance down 1. The problem for us to call this right now is that there are so many close races and so many numbers, so many votes still to be counted and to come in. So until we see more of that, this we know will be a progressive conservative government. We just don't know whether it's a majority or a minority. Connell Smith is at PC Party headquarters in Quispam Sis. And Connell, you have someone there to talk to?
I do. We've been hearing some cheers over the last 15 or 20 minutes, actually, since very shortly after the polls closed here, and these results started to come in. We now have, we're showing the PCs leading in 26, and elected in several. And I'm standing here with party strategist Paul Destu, who has been traveling with Mr. Higgs on the bus. And just tell me, what's your reaction?
Well, we were certainly hoping for a majority. It seems that we are in majority territory now. It's still early in the night, but it indicates pretty well what we were seeing through the full campaign. And if it continues like that, we will have a majority government, and I think Mr. Higgs will have one as that.
How did the campaign strategy change this time from 2018?
Well, different leaders in the major opposition party, different issues. We started this in a pandemic, and we had to adapt ourselves to the reality, if you want. For instance, focus groups were done virtually as opposed to have them in-house. So yeah, it has been different, but it's been pretty well what we were anticipating.
Thank you, Mr. Destu.
You're welcome.
And that's Paul Destu, strategist for the party. He's been traveling with Mr. Higgs, and I guess these results are looking very promising. Harry, throwing back to you.
A smattering of applause behind you, Connell. We'll check in with you a little later, but certainly things going Blaine Higgs's way. Rachel, you have some returns to comment on.
Yeah, well, let's find out where the progressive conservatives are making it happen for them. In Fredericton, York, they've taken it looks like they're in progress of taking a seat from the People's Alliance. PC candidate Ryan Cullens is ahead by 546 votes over the Green candidate Melissa Fraser, and the People's Alliance incumbent Rick DeSaulnier trailing in third place there with 8 of 13 polls reporting. In Moncton South, where Kathy Rogers, New Brunswick's first female finance officer, did not reoffer, we see the PCs in the lead there. Greg Turner, nearly 500 votes ahead of the Liberal candidate Tyson Milner. The Greens in third place there. And in St. John Harbour, this riding was one to watch. We just had no idea what was going to happen here. Many candidates on the board. Arlene Dunn, a relatively unknown face on the political scene, is in the lead there. PC candidate Arlene Dunn is in the lead by 117 votes. In second place, Brent Harris for the Greens. In third, Alice McKim for the Liberals.
Yeah, you can suspect that the Greens are not making it easy for the Liberals in that riding, especially. Jacques, I think you have some ridings for us to look at as well.
Yes, we do. We've got Moncton East up now, and this was a big one to watch. Danielle Alain, progressive conservative candidate, leading Monique LeBlanc, the incumbent Liberal, by 788 votes. He may well turn out to be the only Francophone elected among the PCs, but there's still some races to come, of course. But that's a big pickup for the PCs in Moncton. And then heading up the St. John River to Carleton, Victoria, Margaret Johnson in a rematch with Andrew Harvey, who beat her by a couple hundred votes last time for the Liberals, the famous Harvey get out the vote machine. Falling short right now, Margaret Johnson's ahead by 241 votes.
All right. Let's take a look at the map in New Brunswick, give you an idea of how this race is breaking down geographically, and I mean, this really tells a story. The Liberals holding on to their sort of fortress north relatively easily, but look at what the PCs have managed to do. They've occupied, 2/3 of the rest of the province. The Liberals had to do well in the cities as well, Jacques, like Moncton.
That's right. And right now, I mean, the PCs are just getting enough seats to keep them from doing that.
All right, let's go to Liberal headquarters. Maeve McFadden standing by there. Maeve, what's the mood there, and how are Liberals reacting to these returns so far?
Well, certainly these are not the numbers, Harry, that the Liberals were hoping to see tonight. And probably one person that is very disappointed with those results so far anyway is Donald Arsenault. He's been the Liberal campaign manager. Donald, thank you for joining me tonight.
My pleasure.
These certainly weren't the numbers you were expecting to see so far, but what's your reaction to...
Yeah, look, when we go back a month or a month and a half ago before this campaign started, we were over 20 points behind. For us to make it a fighting chance going into the last days of this campaign, I think it shows the true grit of not only the leader, Kevin Vickers, but as well as the whole Liberal team. So we fought to the end. We feel we have a good, responsible platform that really connects with New Brunswickers. So I see the results, and the night's still young. It's not 9 o'clock yet, so there's still lots to be counted, and we'll see how the night goes. But look, I'm still very proud of the Liberal team and what they presented to New Brunswickers over the past month.
Now, so far, Kevin Vickers trailing. How confident are you he's going to win his seat tonight?
Well, we knew there was going to be a battle. Michelle Conroy is very good on the ground in the Miramichi in her first term, but we also have the opportunity in the Miramichi to elect the next premier of New Brunswick. So, we feel that Kevin can come out on top in that riding. We'll see how the night goes, but we knew it was a battle from the beginning, and that's why the leader did spend some time during the campaign in Miramichi to try to reconnect with voters. Look, we're in this unnecessary election campaign that Blaine Higgs called, and it's a 28-day campaign. Pure political opportunism. He's seen a window for him to call that election, and for us and parties like the Liberal Party, we had a very short time to prepare and get our ideas known out there. So it was a challenge, and we agree with it.
Thank you very much, Donald.
Thank you.
Harry, that is Donald Arsenault, Liberal campaign manager.
All right, Maeve, thank you for that. Maeve McFadden at Liberal headquarters. The Conservatives now leading or elected in 26 ridings, and if this night finishes like this, the man in charge is going to be the fellow elected in this next riding, Quispam-Sis, Rachel Cave. There's Blaine Higgs.
There's Blaine Higgs, re-elected. We're projecting in Quispam-Sis with leading by nearly 900 votes over the Liberal challenger Robert Hunt there. This riding has been traditionally Conservative with a brief stretch by Mary Squire, which Blaine Higgs has won that and hasn't let it go. And this is exactly what he wants to see tonight.
Another leader, Fredericton Grand Lake. We'll see how Chris Austin is doing. He's been declared elected.
Yeah, this was a riding where the PCs thought they were in the hunt as recently as a week ago, but it could be that Austin's solid performance in debates and leaders' forums have really boosted his chances and put him right back
All right,
in
let's
contention.
take another quick look at PC headquarters to see what's happening there. They're still just sitting around drinking it in and looking for a victory party later tonight. So where things stand right now, the Progressive Conservatives leading or elected in 26 ridings, 25 needed to form a majority government, so they're ahead of what they need. The Liberals at 17 leading and elected. The Green Party leading or elected in 4, and the People's Alliance in 2. In fact, among those Greens, there's Moncton, the candidate in Moncton Centre, Jacques.
Moncton Centre and also in Fredericton North. So the Greens are behind in Memramcook-Tantramar at the moment, but ahead in 2 ridings that they do not hold. All are close races.
Indeed. And the People's Alliance with 2. I know Chris Austin hoped that he would manage to maintain his 3 and maybe even add to it, but it's going to be a tough race for them. Presumably, Rachel, because they can't steal or get enough of the PC vote to go with the People's Alliance.
Yeah, something may not have worked there for Chris Austin in his messaging. That he was the one who would hold a majority government in check, specifically speaking to the Progressive Conservatives, that they had some hidden agenda that the People's Party, People's Alliance Party could protect New Brunswickers from, but that didn't seem to work. If they were angry when they voted in the People's Alliance candidates in 2018, it's dissipated.
All right, let's take a look at this summary board. This gives an indication of where the Progressive Conservatives are really making their votes work tonight. And you look at southern New Brunswick, western New Brunswick, they're at above 50%. The area of Fredericton, 41%. Really, the only place they are down, Jacques, is in the north.
That's right, and I mean, you know, with all those seats in Moncton, Fredericton, and St. John, I mean, these increases there are what are tipping those races, some of those races, the seats they didn't have before in their favor.
Okay, let's head back to St. John, or Quispamsis, I should say, where Connell Smith is standing by with the guest at the PC party headquarters. Connell.
Harry, I'm with Louis Legere, the campaign manager for the campaign, and obviously a very happy man this evening with that declaration. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What did you guys do? You spent the last 72 hours on the road. You toured them. Tell me where you were. You were in the north part of the province?
Well, the Premier did a tour of northern New Brunswick and southeastern New Brunswick as well. I wasn't on the bus. I was in the headquarters running the campaign. But,
what was the strategy? What were you looking for?
Well, I think the strategy is showing tonight. I think we were confident in our numbers. I need to say that the Premier did not wish this election. He would have been happy without an election, sincerely, and he tried very hard not to have one. We knew that he could win. We knew that the fundamentals were right. And that, I think that there is no real surprise for us tonight in the sense that the numbers have actually not changed very much since the beginning of the campaign to today, based on the numbers that I would have seen. And it's a humbling experience. It's still digesting it, but it's a good feeling. But I think New Brunswick will be in good shape. I think Premier Higgs will be up to the job.
Do you have that Francophone presence that you need to get past this division that we've had politically?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's a very strong presence of Francophone within the party. I see that Daniel Alain has made it up to now, and I think there's actually a few more seats that are in play tonight. If I look at the screen, I think the evening is still young. I think let's wait and see. But I think this is a very good sign. Obviously, a lot of Francophones have voted for these MLAs as well, because it's not just in one part. Francophones all over the province. So this is it's a good night. It's a very good night.
All right. Congratulations. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Louis Legere, campaign manager for the PCs this time around. Harry, back to you.
Thank you very much, Connell. Connell Smith there, and the PCs being relatively reticent. No victory dance there yet, but certainly some satisfaction with what they're doing. 72% of the polls have been counted, so knock on wood, the tabulators are working, Rachel Cave and Jacques Poitras, so it may not be too late a night. We'll see how things go. The story so far, the Progressive Conservative Party, led by Blaine Higgs, ahead or elected in 26 ridings in the province. The Liberals leading or elected in 17. The Green Party holding on to 4 at this point, still leading or elected in 4, and the People's Alliance leading or elected in 2. So, Jacques, we saw this this projection early on in the polling, and it seems to have come to fruition. I wonder if the number of people that voted early, almost 200,000 votes, almost half of the electorate, or the voting electorate in 2018, cast votes even before the leaders' forum and the leaders' debate.
That's right. We did see a huge advance poll turnout, a lot of early voting at returning offices, and the polls tightened a bit in the last week of the campaign based on what we saw, but those votes were cast before that tightening, before the debates and the leaders' forums, where maybe some people started to take a look at the other party, so it locked in presumably a lot of PC vote before this final week and this final shaking up of people's thinking. And I have to think that some of this PC margin and perhaps this majority, if they get there, is due to that early voting.
Well, another leader to tell you about right now being elected, and this is David Kuhn in Fredericton South, the leader of the Green Party. Rachel Cave, quite a substantial lead for David Kuhn. Not a huge surprise.
Not a huge surprise at all. David Kuhn has been nothing but consistent for decades now in his message and his slow build of the party since taking leadership in 2012. He did want to have a position of influence. He may not have it in a PC majority government in the same way, but the Green Party will be there acting in opposition as they've been doing for a while. There's some Green stalwarts right there at Green Party headquarters in Fredericton. Happy to see that, and watching the returns, no doubt, on CBC television. So good to have them along as viewers. All across the province, we are getting returns. All 49 polls reporting now. More than 72% of those polls counted. And here's where we are. The Progressive Conservatives leading or elected in 26 ridings. They needed 25 for majority government. They've achieved that, plus the Liberals leading or elected in 17, the Greens in 4, and the People's Alliance in 2. Now, we were going to talk just a few minutes ago with Eric Grenier. I wonder if he's still there, because I wanted to talk to him about that Green Party showing. But first, let's go to Terry Segay. He's standing by with the guest. Terry.
Thank you very much, Harry. I am with Katie Davey. She has a degree in political science from UNB. She is the creator of Femme Wonk, which is a policy and current affairs podcast. Good evening, Ms. Davey. Welcome to the program.
Thanks so much.
How are you interpreting these results?
Well, in some ways, they're, I think, what we expected. The polling was suggesting the Progressive Conservatives were definitely leading. I think, though, it is surprising to see the Greens doing as well as they are in 2 seats, particularly Fredericton North and Moncton Centre. So that's probably something I wasn't necessarily expecting, but I think it's positive.
What were the issues that resulted in the Progressive Conservatives getting the number of seats they have now?
Well, I think, honestly, much of that had to do with the really short time frame for the election. Of course, people knew who the premier was. It didn't give an opportunity, really, for folks like Kevin Vickers, a new leader, to present himself to the voters. And in many cases, in local ridings as well, candidates didn't necessarily have that opportunity either. And in the pandemic, they really didn't have an opportunity to run a really robust local ground campaign, and I think in some of these tighter ridings, we're seeing the results of that.
Ms. Davey, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us. Great
Pleasure.
to talk
Thank
to you.
you.
Harry, back to you.
Thank you, Terry. Terry Segay. We'll hear much from him through the course of the evening. I want to take you to another leader's riding. This is Miramichi, and not a good night for Kevin Vickers. He continues to trail Michelle Conroy by quite a substantial margin.
I think with this overall result and with this result in Miramichi, Mr. Vickers' time as Liberal leader might be very short.
Absolutely. Well, we'll keep an eye on that. Kevin Vickers lagging the leader, Michelle Conroy, in Miramichi. Tough job for him there. You know, we had talked about whether this was, whether New Brunswick voters would be embracing progressive conservative policy. That's why they voted for the party. Or was this very simply, could it be explained as a referendum on the leadership of Blaine Higgs during this COVID period?
The party insiders that I spoke to during the campaign said that in their polling, they did polling on voter intention, but they also asked people, what's your number one issue? What's the thing that's going to decide how you vote at the ballot box? And by far it was handling of COVID-19. I mean, it was a clear advantage for them. Whether there was an all-party committee that everyone attended and could take credit for some of the decision-making oversight. The Premier was the one at the podium day after day. He was the one who convened that committee. It was created. It was his idea to do it. And voters seemed to feel that, even though he was ahead in the polls before the pandemic, voters seemed to feel that this was the thing that mattered most, and he called the election on that basis, and people responded.
He had one of the highest approval ratings of Canadian premiers right across the country.
81% at one point, the highest for a time.
Let's take a look right now at Liberal Party headquarters. I think we have a shot there, and not a very joyful crowd there right now. There's Don Arsenault, and the feeling was that Blaine Higgs, in a sense, took advantage of the parties by calling this election when he did. But as you said at the beginning, Jacques, there was, a threat that he faced in terms of by-elections and a challenge that he faced if he didn't call an election.
Yeah, you know, that was the Premier's rationale, although those by-elections likely all would have reverted to the status quo in terms of how they'd been held before. What really changed the dynamic for him was when Robert Gauvin left in February and he could no longer rely on just the People's Alliance to get things passed. That really is what changed the dynamic. It's just that the pandemic froze that in place for a few months, put that on hold. But as we started to move out of the orange and red phases, you know, it became more necessary for Higgs to start thinking about how he was going to implement an agenda post-pandemic. And without Gauvin in his caucus, he really had to go to the Greens as well. So it was time in his mind to get a majority.
Well, let's go to Green Party headquarters right now in Fredericton. I think David Kuhn is there. David Kuhn, good to see you tonight. You're leading or elected in 3 ridings right now. How do you feel about where you are in the context of how the Progressive Conservatives and the Liberals are doing?
Well, certainly, I mean, we're surging in our numbers in a number of ridings. I'm really thankful to the people of Fredericton South for putting their confidence back in me, and I'm ready to get back to work for them. But we've got some close races around the province, and I'm looking forward to really positive outcomes in those close races.
Right now, you've just dropped a seat. You're leading or elected in 2. Congratulations, by the way, in winning your own seat, David Kuhn. But this, you must have imagined you would do better than this. You have support, but it's very diffused around the province, not substantive enough in many places to gain you the seats you were hoping for.
Well, one of the things we've seen is a real surge in the votes in the Moncton area and in northern New Brunswick, and that's a huge breakthrough for Greens in this province.
If you finish this election with just 2 seats, where does that leave you as leader of the Green Party? Is it time perhaps to, pass that on to someone else?
Well, let's wait till we see when all the results are in and how many seats we end up with at the end of the night, Harry.
We talked about this a few days ago when I interviewed you, and I asked you how many seats you had targeted. 7, 8, 9?
Well, I was looking, I think what I said was I was looking to at least double our seats, or more than double our seats. Yeah.
You don't appear to be doing that. Why do you think that is?
Well, there's be lots of time for, dissecting and looking into the entrails of this election when it's all over, but this is not the time to do that.
How much room will there be for you to be legislatively artful when the PCs don't need your agreement to achieve what they want to achieve?
Well, I've developed an excellent working relationship with a lot of the senior Progressive Conservative cabinet members over the years, and I expect that strong relationship will be really helpful in moving issues ahead for both Fredericton South and for the province.
So your view of Blaine Higgs is that he will continue to look for your cooperation as the party leader?
What I'm saying is that I believe I'll continue to have significant influence with his cabinet members and with him, especially on areas of common ground around health care and now local food security as well, since he's got behind that. Mental health, some of the issues that I pushed so hard for and my caucus has pushed hard for over the years have now floated to the top for Blaine Higgs, and that's because of the Green presence in the Legislative Assembly, so we'll continue to push those forward.
What do you think was going on in the Progressive Conservative campaign that garnered them this imminent majority?
Oh, I think everyone knows that Blaine Higgs was flying high in the polls because of the handling of the COVID response to the COVID pandemic in New Brunswick, and that's exactly why he chose to call this unneeded election at this time.
When you go back to work at the legislature, what's your priority going to be? Is it going to be policy generating policy, I should say, or is it going to be building the party even further?
Well, the first thing back in the legislature is to get back to work on the response to COVID-19 this fall, and making sure that all of the things that need to be in place are there to protect New Brunswickers, keep everyone safe, healthy, and secure as we go into a fall with kids in school and back at the universities, back at our colleges, and we've got to be really, really on the mark to make sure that we continue to keep the kind of situation we have right now in this province through the fall.
Well, David Coon, good to see you. Congratulations again on winning your seat, and good luck for the remainder of the night.
Thanks, Harry.
All the best. David Coon, the leader of the Green Party. Let's take a look at the summary of the Green votes to give you an idea of where their support was and where it wasn't. Eastern New Brunswick, Fredericton, obviously a hot spot for the Greens, but they probably could have done better in Fredericton than 23%. St. John, just 10%. They weren't making any headway in Miramichi. So with 15.1% overall, they really underperformed the expectation.
You can also see in those numbers they're up in most places by a little rather than going up in a couple of places by a lot. So their increase in support was inefficient. It was, as you said with speaking to David Coon, it was spread thin. It has to be concentrated somewhere for seats to tip. Now they're still in a couple of close races, but that is the downside, I guess, of a provincial rise in your numbers.
Absolutely, yeah. Rachel, you have some returns to tell us about.
Yeah, well, we knew that the Progressive Conservatives could do this without francophone ridings, but we just want to show you how poorly in some ways they did in the north. In Restigouche West, where Gilles Lepage is projected elected, we have the Green candidate in second, Charles Thériault, and the PC candidate in a distant third there. So reluctant to park their votes with the PC party. And here again in Caraquet, where Isabelle Thériault is projected elected for the Liberals, again a third place finish for the PC's Caraquet Mayor Kevin Haché. So a lesser performance than in 2018. And in Shippagan-Lamec-Miscou, which was Robert Gauvin as a Progressive Conservative, we see Eric Mallet projected elected and the PC candidate Jean Gerard Chiasson in third place. So ridings in the north would rather, so there's a split on the Progressive side.
The vote.
And, and the PC's just not a popular choice.
So Blaine Higgs in the last election, 2018, made promises. He was going to learn French. He was going to get into those parts of the province that the PCs didn't win. And here we are again in 2020. Not only has he not got command of the other official language of this province, but they haven't made the inroads that they had hoped to. There's some work to be done there if Blaine Higgs is successful with the majority government by the end of tonight.
Yeah, it's hard to tell to what degree that keeps him up at night. I mean, you haven't seen him make the overtures. You haven't seen him even make some symbolic grasps that have been offered to him. I mentioned the Acadian Society wanted him just to commit to a standing committee on the Official Languages Act. He's not thrown any bones that you've seen. And every day, you heard David Coon saying his command of COVID-19, just to see that and experience that at that daily pressing that we all, that briefing that we all tuned into at 2 o'clock together as a collective, Blaine Higgs was not speaking to Francophones in their language.
Here's another example, Harry. Often when he gets into discussions about language, he will start talking about French immersion. And there is a real issue with how French immersion has been working. But that's a concern for English New Brunswickers, English parents who send their kids to English schools to learn a second language. He doesn't seem to be able to grasp or put himself in the shoes of Francophone New Brunswickers in a minority language context who feel their language is threatened by assimilation. And want to hear at least that a premier gets that somewhere in their gut and sympathizes and is on their side. And when you can't do that kind of poetic politics, those voters notice. And that's a real challenge for him. He's got the majority. He doesn't need them to govern. But long-term politically, it's healthier when all New Brunswickers see themselves represented in a government.
Well, absolutely. Long memories in the north as well, thinking of him starting out politically with the Core Party. His unwillingness to support the Francophonie Games may have upset some Francophones in the north. So a lot of ground to make up there if he wants to be a premier of the whole province. Mackenzie Thomason is the interim leader of the NDP. It's a party that has struggled through this campaign, but he is at his headquarters tonight. We're waiting for him to step up and talk a bit about where they're at. But right now, let's go to Eric Grenier. And Eric, I was just talking with Green leader David Kuhn. He's leading or elected in 3 seats right now. Tell us about the vote stealing or vote splitting the Greens may have experienced with the Liberal Party, and whether that gave an advantage to the PCs that they didn't expect.
Well, we didn't see as much of a gain for the Greens as the polls were suggesting by the end of the campaign, where some of them were suggesting they were somewhere north of 20%. Instead, they're somewhere around 15 right now, which is a little bit above where they were in the last election. And most of that vote, we have to think, had come from the Liberals, because the PCs are up, having taken some vote presumably from the People's Alliance. But I think for the Greens, I think they would probably be pretty disappointed with these results, because the 3 seats that they're currently leading or elected in are the seats that they had at dissolution, so we're not looking at any gains. And that's, if any of those Greens had been defeated, they would have been the first Greens to be defeated anywhere in the country for a provincial or federal legislature who was elected as a Green. But I think when we saw some of the momentum that the polls seemed to be suggesting that the Greens had at the tail end of the campaign, I think the Greens would have liked to have caused a lot more problems for the Liberals than we saw here. But if we do look at where they have some silver lining, they are still making some progress up from the previous election, so establishing themselves as a third party. And if you look at a place like Fredericton, they were actually second there. They placed second behind the PCs by a sizable margin, but for the Greens to be second in Fredericton and the Liberals fourth behind the People's Alliance, that is a building block for them going forward.
Greens are third in 24 ridings right now as these returns come in. So that gives a sense of how widespread their support is, but shallow yet.
And I think when you're looking for Mackenzie Thomason for the New Democrats, I think they need to be really concerned that their time as that third party might be well behind them now.
Absolutely. So the Progressive Conservatives leading or elected in 27 ridings. Thank you, Eric. Eric Grenier, the CBC's polls analyst, looking at the numbers there. The Liberals leading or elected in 17. Not a great night for the Liberals. The Green Party holding on to their 3 seats. That was the bare minimum. But David Kuhn didn't seem bothered by that. He's happy to have 3 seats and still be a factor in the legislature. The question is, what will Blaine Higgs do with a majority government? And Jacques and Rachel, when I interviewed him, I peppered him with that question. What do you want to do with the majority that you couldn't get done with the minority government? And he said, it's just stability. Stability is what we want. But with stability comes power.
He talked about stability, but he also said during those 4-party negotiations in August that he wanted to build a vision for the future, for the direction of the province that all parties could buy into and that would outlast any one government. He wants to do things, he wants to reorientate the whole focus of government towards something different, and we didn't hear a lot about it during the campaign. But, he canceled the hospital reforms but says we're going to talk about what to do with health. Municipal tax reform. No real specifics during the campaign, but we know it's on the agenda. That binding arbitration bill that applies to firefighters and police, very contentious, a lot of opposition among the unions. That is something that he wants to do. So he can do that now, and I think we'll probably see him move fairly quickly on those things because he's been waiting for this opportunity for 2 years or 10 years, depending on how you look at it.
Yes.
And, if he's 66 years old, he may not want to seek re-election in 4 years. So I think we could see once COVID-19 recedes further, a real push for some fast action on a number of areas.
Well, the CBC decision desk has reached another projection tonight. It will be a PC government, we know that, but it will indeed be a majority government for Blaine Higgs. So, a remarkable conclusion to a disciplined campaign, Rachel Cave. We saw no mishaps. There were very few mistakes or sensational stories. Blaine Higgs led this campaign. He gambled that his position as Premier in a very public role, leading the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, would carry with voters. they wouldn't worry about the rest, and that appears to have been the case.
Yeah, very much a validated gamble here. He just got it right down the slot. I mean, this could have gone sideways. We could have gone back to school. COVID cases could have risen. Some kind of scandal could have knocked him off his message, but it didn't. And it was a lot about, as much as Jacques has talked about what could come, he didn't really go there in his campaign. It was a very retrospective, here's my platform, I've already put in action or accomplished 60% of the things I set out to do in 2018, and I'm still the fiscal manager of this province. We were on track, we had a surplus. He's not going to pull out his wallet at this point. That's not the way he's going to go.
It was really a cheap win for Blaine Higgs, as Rachel says. He didn't have to make any promises.
That's right. You know, I wonder if the people watching out there tonight include John Horgan, Premier of BC, Dennis King, Premier of PEI. They have minority governments as well. I'm sure they're wondering what the proper time is to go to the polls during a pandemic. Well, they can look now at Blaine Higgs and say, you know what? He took a gamble. It paid off. Maybe we should do that too.
Let's take a look at, yes, exactly. Let's take a look at the vote share to get an idea of how conclusive this was. 42.7% needed of the vote, generally speaking, for a majority. But when your voting is as efficient as it is for the PCs, you could do it at 39.5%. The Liberals close behind, but not nearly as successful, turning those votes into seats. And the Greens at 15.3. Here's a look at the seat change. The PCs gaining 5 seats. They only needed 3. The Liberals down 4 seats, and the People's Alliance down 1 as well. So the path to power for Blaine Higgs, he could see when he called the election, and he's clearly there now.
And with 27, if that holds, it's comfortable. Yeah. You know, he can appoint a PC speaker and still have a bit of room to maneuver in the House in votes.
Jacques, you have some results there as well.
Yeah, we wanted to look, now that we've called the majority government, we want to look at some potential cabinet ministers. So here's Daniel Alain in Moncton East, the only Francophone PC who's been elected. He will obviously play a big role addressing some of those problems that the PCs have in Francophone New Brunswick. He will kind of be, I'm sure, a roving ambassador in northern New Brunswick for the new Higgs government. Coming up next, we've got Fredericton North, Jill Green. This was a close race for a while against the Greens. Green versus Green. But Jill Green's a business owner, ran last time, very impressive in person. I could see her maybe going into a PC cabinet. Another riding that might get a minister, although St. John is full of ministers right now, but Arlene Dunn in St. John Harbour would add another woman to the PC cabinet. Her experience with the building trades unions would put her in a good spot to run a department. And one other I think we should note as well in Moncton South, Greg Turner, a longtime city councillor, very plugged in businessman, mover and shaker in the city. It's easy to imagine him going into cabinet as well. All right, names to keep an eye on as we conclude tonight and look to the future and where Blaine Higgs will look to for talent for his cabinet. You know, one of the things that was talked about during this campaign was the need in the province for an inquiry into systemic racism. And Rachel Cave, this was a huge issue for Indigenous communities in this province. Yeah, they asked Blaine Higgs for it. His response was not, absolutely not, but was, no, we're not going to do it that way, we're going to do it this way. And there was a lot of antipathy toward that. Yeah, you know, Wolastoqey leaders and others really tried to hold his feet to the fire on this one, pressing the case right up almost to Election Day. And you have to listen to how Blaine Higgs answers this question carefully, because, as you say, it's not a flat no. He said he was interested in entering into negotiations about what a public inquiry would do, what kind of action might come out of it, and whether what we really should be doing is looking into the work that's already done and acting on what we already have in this country. Let's go over to Terry Sege right now, because he has Pam Palmater, a well-known lawyer, with him. Terry?
Thank you very much, Harry. Nicely set up. I appreciate you doing that work for me, because I am getting a little weary. Dr. Pam Palmater is the chair in Indigenous Governance at Ryerson University. Good evening, Dr. Palmater. Welcome to the program. Thanks for doing this for us.
Well, I only wish I was there in person back home.
Yeah, it would be nice if you were here. So, as you know, the CBC Decision Desk is calling for a Conservative majority government, or has called a Conservative majority government. Blaine Higgs will be going back into the Premier's office. He is the guy who said no to the request for a public inquiry into systemic racism in New Brunswick. What is going to happen to Indigenous issues in New Brunswick now that Blaine Higgs has a majority? What would your expectation be?
Well, my expectation is that things are going to very slowly increase in terms of tensions, that there's going to be more difficulties, just like we've seen with Conservative governments in other provinces. They're very careful with their wording. They don't say yes, they don't say no. But when we're talking about widespread systemic racism, that's undeniable in Canada and the US, quite frankly, and New Brunswick isn't immune from that. This issue isn't going away. Indigenous peoples on the ground have been very vocal about that. And then there's some other things in the platform that could be potential tension points as well, like doubling the conservation and protected areas, keeping in mind that all of the land in New Brunswick is unceded territories. They weren't surrendered in treaties. They're considered Aboriginal title in the courts. So that's another potential tension point, depending on how fast and how he moves forward with that.
What would your advice be to Indigenous leaders in New Brunswick now?
Oh, I'd say we definitely need a strategy. A strategy around land is the most critical. So if you look at, Blaine Higgs' platform, it's very light in general. Like all of them, we're very, very light in terms of policy decisions, but no systemic racism inquiry, a lot of things around nuclear power without consultations with First Nations, these increase of protected areas, increases in funding for bilingualism in French, but you don't see corresponding amounts for First Nations. So I think that First Nations are going to have to be very strategic behind the scenes, actually come up with a political plan moving forward, knowing what's happened in New Brunswick here at this election, but also the experiences of what's happening in other provinces with Conservative leaders. There's lessons to be learned from those provinces.
What do you think that majority government should do or could do to indicate to Indigenous communities in New Brunswick that it is willing to listen?
I think the most important thing is this inquiry. This is what people are saying they want. This is what the whole world right now is saying is needed. I think he shouldn't be completely oblivious to that. And number two, I think he's going to have to be very, very careful around any land or treaty rights issues. This is something that requires not just political consultations with elected leaders. It requires grassroots participation. It requires information flows, regular relationship building, because ultimately the only people who can dispose or make deals of any lands in New Brunswick are the people in terms of referendums.
What evidence have you seen that the government recognizes that?
I haven't, which is one of the main concerns. When you see all around Canada and the US this call to address systemic racism and the federal government coming out and saying, yes, we need to deal with it, people needing to deal with it and really not acknowledging that there's a significant problem, I think that's a potential tension. And just this focus on smaller item things, as opposed to, the fact that the land issue in New Brunswick has never been dealt with. Treaty rights have never been fully dealt with. You've got homelessness, you've got addictions, you've got mental health, you've got poverty, food insecurity, and no real plan for the province's role in how to deal with that in First Nations. And I just see him looking towards the federal government too much on those kinds of issues.
Pamela Palmer, thank you so much for your time. Nice to talk to you.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Pamela Palmer, Chair in Indigenous Governance at Ryerson University. Back to you, Harry.
All right, Terry, thank you for that. So the CBC Decision Desk projecting a Conservative majority, a progressive Conservative majority for New Brunswick. Let's take a look now at one of the Liberal ridings, or Miramichi. I shouldn't say a Liberal riding because it isn't. This is being held by Michelle Conroy right now with a substantial lead over Kevin Vickers and Rachel Trouble for the Liberal leader there?
Trouble in every way for the Liberal leader to not get a seat and also see the Liberal Party go down in terms of seats in the legislature. Before the show, we've all talked a little bit about Kevin Vickers maybe not being tested enough for this election. That he came in acclaimed, as we mentioned earlier. He was supposed to be a leadership convention, a place where people jostle with ideas and test things out. It ended up being an acclamation. Then there was going to be a policy convention. That fell to the wayside. Maybe people assumed that this man of heroic feats on Parliament Hill, for example, was going to deliver in the election. But when you saw him in the debates or in the Leaders Forum, there was just, he sounded folksy in his language, but he didn't quite connect. He said, "I'm the one who will keep you safe." But they've gone with Blaine Higgs to keep them safe. So
couldn't quite close the deal for the Liberal Party. But there are some other reasons, some practical reasons for why we're seeing this riding returning the way it is right now, Jacques.
Yeah, that's right. The reason people might be wondering why we haven't called this for Michelle Conroy with such a huge lead. We have two polls we're waiting on. There's a special poll that we're waiting on, and then there's an ordinary poll, meaning votes that were cast today. And we're still trying to sort out the details, but the votes are being driven back to Miramichi, to elections in New Brunswick in the ordinary poll. As a result, because we have those two polls outstanding, we don't know how many votes are there. We're just holding off on declaring Michelle Conroy elected. This is a party leader. It's a big deal to call a race that defeats a party leader. So we're just holding off a while longer to see those votes.
All right, we'll keep an eye on that one and see how it comes along. So the Progressive Conservatives will be enjoying a majority government, is the CBC projection tonight. And this is where Blaine Higgs wanted to be when he called this election. He ran a campaign, the Conservatives ran a campaign that was subtle, that was relatively low-key, ran on his record as a leader in the province during a time of considerable concern, and really managed to get through. I don't think there was really a single occasion where one of the other parties was able to lay a glove on Blaine Higgs through this campaign, or make a punch that really stuck.
No, I mean, you heard the sort of the message of distrust. That the third parties, the People's Alliance, the Greens, they were the ones that protected us from some unknown. But it didn't play. And I did not detect Blaine Higgs when he was in that situation. He was sipping water and looking very calm. None of that seemed to ruffle him.
He's an engineer, so he figures out a problem and what's the best way to find a solution. What's the machine I can build, the engine that will generate a solution. It was said during the leadership campaign too, he wasn't trying to win in a landslide and crush everybody. How do I build a machine that gets me
where I need to go
over the top to the win? He tried to do that last time in 2018 as well in the election, and he did it here. He had a plan. I'm not going to promise the moon. I'm not going to promise hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm going to talk about what I've done. I'm going to add a few things, continue a few programs, and people can decide. And he felt in his gut that New Brunswickers would go for that, and enough of them have that he got what he wanted. He built the machine to win. Yeah,
sometimes you don't get everything you want, and you just have to be satisfied with something less.
Sure, he would like some of those northern ridings, of course, but did he need them? Mathematically, no.
And one of the other issues is Clinic 554 in Fredericton, the debate over abortion and whether or not Blaine Higgs was contravening the Canada Health Act by not supporting Clinic 554. And I wonder how much that will continue to haunt him as he returns to office. I
don't think you're going to see that issue go away. It'll be interesting to see how the federal government responds. At one point, they withheld funding, about $140,000 for the province because of COVID. They gave that back. So we still have a federal government that may have something to say about the future of Clinic 554.
And Jill Green in Fredericton North, the PC candidate, who I just kind of put in cabinet a few minutes ago, did say during the campaign that she's committed to finding a way to keep those services in the city. She wouldn't commit to fighting for public funding, but she said she will fight to keep the services at that clinic, including abortion, available. So there are candidates in his caucus, MLAs in his caucus, who are going to advance that issue.
I wonder how many voters went out today and in the preceding couple of weeks with the conviction in their minds that they wanted to vote for a minority government, or they thought they would cast their vote in a way that would achieve a minority government. Hard to do, but...
I tend to think the voters who voted Liberal and PC are hoping for a majority for their party. But certainly that was the message that Chris Austin pushed during the whole campaign, and he pushed it in the Leaders Forum last week, and it may be that is what his voters wanted, the people who voted for the alliance.
Let's get Eric Grenier back in here. Eric is the poll specialist with the CBC and was the shepherd of poll tracker through the campaign, keeping us up to date on what the public opinion polls were telling us about the party's chances. Eric, what's your assessment of this evening so far?
Well, certainly a good night for the PCs. That's a pretty obvious thing to say. And I think this is really an example of the PCs doing a very good job of winning. Because if you look at the seats that flipped, usually you have some seats that go back and forth and it comes out in the wash. But here the only seat that party other than the PCs gained was Sheboygan-Lemec-Miscou in northern New Brunswick. And that, of course, was more about Robert Gauvin than it was about the PCs and the Liberals. All the other gains, they're PC gains from the Liberals and the People's Alliance, and almost all of them, except with the one exception of Carleton, Victoria, are urban seats in Fredericton, St. John, and Moncton. So I think this is really a story of the PCs really getting their vote up, but in the places that they really needed to win the seats, targeting the right seats, and every other party just not able to win any of those seats that we said might be up for grabs for example, the Greens. Maybe the Liberals could win a seat like Miramichi where their leader was running. We just didn't see that. It was just the PCs that were able to win the seats, and now they have that small cushion for a majority government.
The problem really is starkly evident when you look at the map in New Brunswick, the color-coded map we had earlier, and you see the stark difference with the red in the northern third of the province and the blue pretty well over almost everything else. There is that gap between Francophone New Brunswick and Anglo New Brunswick, and that is going to be difficult for him to overcome, I would think, Eric.
Yeah, and it's a gap that's gotten wider because we saw that gap in 2018, but the gap between the PCs and the Liberals among Anglophone New Brunswickers wasn't nearly as wide. Now we're seeing that the Liberals won that Francophone vote, if we're looking at just the Francophone majority ridings, by about 40 percentage points, whereas the PCs won the Anglophone vote by about 30 percentage points. So you're looking at a really stark linguistic divide, and that's something that Blaine Higgs is going to have to deal with for the next 4 years.
We were hearing that the campaign signs in the south of the province and the Anglo parts of the province showed Blaine Higgs with the candidates. He was standing behind in many of those signs. In the north, though, you didn't see Blaine Higgs on the campaign signs nearly as much.
No, and I don't think he was someone that was helping them in the north. Obviously, when you saw the debates and the leaders' forums, only David Kuhn and Kevin Vickers attempting to speak French.
All right, Eric Grenier, thanks for that. Eric Grenier in Ottawa there. We'll hear more from him as we carry on through this evening. The Progressive Conservatives are projected to form a majority government by the CBC Decision Desk. This was exactly what Blaine Higgs was aiming for. He's achieved it. But Jacques, once you hive off a member for Speaker of the House from the PCs, he still has lots of room.
He's got enough room. I mean, the previous governments have managed with this kind of margin. Bernard Lord had a margin similar to this in 2003. Sean Graham had a margin similar to this in 2006, and they governed for as long as they wanted. They didn't have to worry too much about votes. Bernard Lord had a little issue at the end with a caucus defection, but this is a working majority, and in terms of ability to pass things, it's indistinguishable from if he'd won 40 seats.
We talked about history-making moments, and Rachel Cave, in a sense, this is one. It's been 17 years since we've seen a sitting government re-elected for another term.
Yeah, and to New Brunswick's detriment, some would say, that we haven't had a government around long enough to make some difficult choices and make them stick, or start something that the next government undoes. I wonder a little bit, too, but what this means for the future of municipal tax reform. We have 8 cities in New Brunswick who are really crying out to keep more of the money that's raised in property taxes. So when you see, for example, all the ridings in the St. John area solidly, it's a juggernaut there. I mean, 60% of the vote is going to Progressive Conservatives in and around St. John. Were they to act with one cohesive voice, it is hard when Connell Smith is reporting on St. John City Council, and it's like closing, historic arenas, or because there's no money, or we can't even put flowers in the flower beds because there's no money. St. John is ready for an injection. They've been crying out for one. Would Blaine Higgs act now to do something better for the municipalities?
Well, we'll talk about that. But first, let's head over to Terry Sege. He's standing by with the guests. Terry, who do you have?
Hi, Harry. I mentioned earlier in the program that I was going to be talking to experts and other New Brunswickers with an interest in how this vote goes tonight. I have on the line Husoni Raymond. He is a Black Lives Matter organizer in Fredericton. Good evening, Mr. Raymond. Welcome to the program. Okay, I can't hear.
Thank you for having me, Terry. Sorry.
Perfect. Okay, now I can hear you. Great. So, looking at a progressive conservative majority government in New Brunswick, what is your level of confidence that you would be able to move your agenda and have action on that agenda on behalf of the government? What would your expectation be?
Well, ideally, we'd like to work with a minority government as it acts as a check and balance. For instance, when that bill that would give police sweeping powers was about to be passed, it was a minority government that kind of helped prevented that. But we're looking forward to collaborating with the PC majority government if elected to move forward our interest. We've met with the Premier before, and he seems to have a particular interest in education.
Okay, realistically, what do you think the chances are that you would see action in that direction from the government?
Realistically, I feel since since meeting with them when they were in a minority situation, they were keen on the incorporating New Brunswick Black history in the public school curriculum point. But we still haven't heard back on the other calls to action related to research into racism and anti-racism strategy for the province.
Okay, so specifically, what policy initiatives would you like to see?
Well, we have 4 main calls to actions related to education, so incorporating Black history into the public school curriculum. We have a call to action related to anti-oppression training for elected officials so they can view policymaking from an intersectional lens, and investment in social services and away from kind of reactive forms of crime prevention through police, and research into racism and the establishment of an anti-racism strategy for the province.
So what would your plan be now to approach the government and say, can we talk?
Yeah, so we've already been in conversations with all the party leaders throughout the time that we've existed here in New Brunswick. So we just continue that relationship, and we've heard from them that they're looking forward to continue working with us to address systemic racism in the province.
Anything you want to say that I haven't asked you to?
Not necessarily, just that we're looking forward to working with all the elected officials, because the main issue and our main contention is anti-Black racism in New Brunswick needs to be addressed, and we need to start having that conversation in the public sphere.
Thank you so much for your time tonight. Great to talk to you.
Thank you, Terry. Take care.
Yeah, my pleasure. You too. That's Husoni Raymond. He is an organizer with the Black Lives Matter movement in Fredericton. Harry, back to you.
Thank you very much, Terry. Some great questions there. Let's take a look now at Miramichi. A sad story for Kevin Vickers. He has not been able to manage a victory there, and Michelle Conroy is projected to win that seat by quite a considerable margin. It turns out the polls that Jacques was talking about, the 2 polls that had been called back or needed to be recounted, contained too few votes to really make the difference.
That's right. The ordinary poll had 196 votes in it. So whoever you are, if you're listening, driving those votes back to Elections New Brunswick in your car, listening to us on the radio, you can slow down, don't run any red lights, Take your time. Be safe.
Right. All right, let's check things out at the Green Party headquarters. Adil Ibrahim is down there with a guest, and if I'm not mistaken, I think you have Jenica Atwin with you, Adil.
That's right, Harry. I have here Jenica Atwin, the federal MP for Fredericton. Now, Ms. Atwin, looking at the results now, how does this compare to what you were hoping for?
Well, of course, I was hoping for David Coon to be reelected, so I'm very happy to be here to celebrate with him. And to see our 3 seats hold is certainly, this is the first goal. We wanted to see more elected. The night's not over yet. I'm still hopeful for maybe a few other gains. But the increase in the popular vote is something for us to celebrate. It's really about the movement, and it's just seeing how close some of the other ridings were, some strong second places. I think it's still a good night for Greens.
So looking at the popular vote, looking at the vote distribution, you were elected in Fredericton. David Coon has had a strong hold here. What will it take, do you think, to break out of that area and reach other ridings in the province?
Well, I mean, like I said, we've already seen a strong showing in some of the other ridings throughout the province. I'd love to see more Francophone support up in the north. I think that's a key area for us to focus on, perhaps for the next election. But I mean, it's about that groundswell. It's a grassroots movement. We're seeing it grow. We're hearing it when we talk to people in communities. So I'm still satisfied, but there's still some work to do, that's for sure.
And what kind of change do you hope Mr. Coon and the party will effect now, in the legislature after this election?
Well, Megan Mitton had an excellent bill before the House that was, looking to add Indigenous languages into our curriculum here in the New Brunswick school system. That's something I hope to see the legislature follow through on. Clearly, I'm hoping for a review of the justice system in New Brunswick, a focus on systemic racism, reproductive justice in our province. I know that I can count on my 3 Green MLAs in the province to push for these issues that I care so deeply about as well. So that's really what I'm going to help support them on as they continue that work.
And how do you feel about Mr. Higgs' stance on those particular issues?
It's disappointing. And I mean, we look at the pandemic response, we look at, how our province has fared, and we, of course, have a lot to be thankful for and to celebrate. But our social justice piece is kind of missing, and I certainly expect more of this government moving forward. And so as a federal voice, I'll be doing what I can to make sure that that's, at least something that is being discussed at those tables.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Harry, that was Jenica Atwin, the federal MP, Green MP for the Fredericton riding.
All right, thank you, Adil. Adil Ibrahim at Green Party headquarters. There are still 5 ridings to report. 4 of them have women in the running. Let's take a look at how the women's vote has worked out here in this election. And Rachel Cave, 10 total elected. That's a gain of 3.
Well, we had 11 women elected in 2018. So the 10 right now is a little bit of a setback. Yeah. We do, as expected, to see the best performance, the PCs, for several reasons, obviously because they have won the most seats, but they also started off with an advantage. I mean, they were organized and they had boasted a record 17 female candidates. We've talked a little bit, too, about the snap election maybe being difficult. The Liberals said the reason they only had 10 female candidates is because it was hard for some women to drop everything and do this.
The Greens,
yes, although the PCs did manage 17 and have elected 9, which is, I believe, the largest share of a government caucus that women have had ever. So that's a big chunk of the PC caucus that are women. Gives Blaine Higgs a lot of opportunity to go for gender parity in his cabinet if he's so inclined. He's got a lot of potential ministers to choose from.
He's got a lot of issues to choose from, too, in terms of prioritizing certain issues. We've talked about municipal reform. Rachel, you mentioned a few minutes ago. Of course, the party's position on education, led by Dominic Carty, the issue of health care, COVID. How do you think Higgs is going to prioritize things when you look at that list?
Well, as we discussed earlier, I mean, he's got this window now of 4 years where he doesn't have to worry about being defeated in votes in the legislature, so he can do a lot of things. And but governments can only do so much as well. They can't do everything they want. So he may have to choose. But certainly, they wanted to address the staffing shortages in health by shifting resources from those ERs at night. That was pulled back, but there's still a need to do something there. Education, they were looking at some changes, maybe overhauling French immersion again, merging grades into mixed classes. That's on hold because of COVID. Municipal reform, the tax reform. There's a whole bunch of things. Never mind COVID-19.
Healthcare, of course. Ted Fleming, the former previous health minister, has won his riding in Rothesay. Does he go back in as health minister? What do you think?
Oh, well, gee, I wish I had a crystal ball for that one. I mean, they, you know, with 27 seats, I was going to talk about engagement. One of their problems when they tried to move around resources and close those ERs overnight, arguably, was that they didn't have buy-in, that people got blindsided by this, that somehow they didn't convey to the electorate why we're doing this and what we're going to accomplish on the other side. And I don't think Ted Fleming helped himself to explain that. Maybe you don't need a deft touch when you have 27 seats. Maybe you can just make it happen without too much placating of anyone.
When you have a global health issue, a global health emergency, a pandemic, and as we had in COVID-19, and you never hear from the health minister, though, that says something, doesn't it?
Well, I wonder. I mean, you know, Ted Fleming's a very capable minister, but you're right. Dominic Carty was more of the lead person on that rhetorically in many ways, as well as the Premier. And this is the chance for Higgs to look at a larger caucus with some newer, some women, as we said, some newer, younger MLAs. He doesn't have to put everyone back in that he had before. He could say, well, who are maybe some of the more senior people who may be in their last term? Maybe I'll give them something different to do. He may shuffle. Maybe Dominic Carty goes to health or finance or something else. He's clearly proven himself in a number of ways as a minister. And maybe he puts someone else in education to finish those reforms. He's got choices. He's got a lot of choices.
Does he keep the COVID committee? Does he continue to include the leaders of the other parties in the COVID committee?
He may. We'll see. He said he wanted to. He said he wanted that, before he called the election, he said he wanted that committee to expand, to take in other policy areas. That's clearly not going to happen. But, you know, on the other hand, he doesn't need to. So he may do it in a sort of symbolic way, but one of the reasons, you know, that COVID committee was an idea in that Dominic Carty memo that Carty sent around at the very beginning of the pandemic. And he said it was needed because there was a minority government and there needed to be buy-in to government action. Yeah. Well, there isn't a minority government now. So, you know, those things may change.
Let's go to People's Alliance headquarters. Leader Chris Austin, who's won his seat, just getting up to talk. Let's listen in.
It's not obviously the outcome that we had hoped for. But I can tell you what, we are proud of the team that worked so hard during this campaign. And I just got off with Michelle Conroy, off the phone with Michelle Conroy, the Dragon Slayer. And she's very pleased with, of course, the win there. I'm very thankful to the supporters that chose to, re-elect me for Fredericton Grand Lake. You know, I'll work as hard as I can for them and for your cause. And, I think it's very important tonight that all of you, this from the very start was a grassroots effort. It was an effort of everyday people that get tired of the status quo, that wanted to see some change. And I can tell you, since we started, we have created political change in all the spheres. So despite not having that minority government we were hoping for and the gains that we were looking for, I'm still very confident that we have made some significant change in the political landscape, and there's only much more to come as we move forward. We still have our foot in the door, make no mistake about it. You know, they say behind any good man, if they choose to call me that, I've been called all kinds of things, but they say behind every good man is a good woman. I want to thank my wife and my family for being there. You know, there's no question when you're in politics how much it takes out of the family. I'm not alone in that. I know every party, every leader goes through the same type of thing. So I want to thank my wife and the kids. My family's here, my mom, my dad, grandmother, brother, sister. All of them are here to support me and what we've done. And I'm excited that we're going to continue to move forward. and still have a voice for the people in the legislature. So again, thank you, team. You worked so hard. You should be proud of yourself. We are still in the legislature, and we're still there to bring that common sense aspect to politics. So I'm not sure if there's any questions from the media, but be happy to take them.
There you have it, Chris Austin, acknowledging that the result of 2 seats in this election was not what they were hoping for, but claiming that he and his party still have, to quote him, a foot in the door, still having room to lay out some legislative strategies in the legislature with the common sense revolution that he was trying to lead. But this has got to be a disappointment. Rick Desaulniers, I think, was the third PA MLA in the House. He's gone down to defeat. On the other hand, you look at Michelle Conroy. He, as Chris Austin said, the Dragon Slayer. She has. Go ahead.
Yes, sorry, but the big marker really is leverage, and in a minority government he had it, and that was his whole pitch in this campaign, was to keep it, and voters have given Higgs a majority, so he's got 2 seats. The party survives. It's not in any existential danger in the next 4 years. He gets to ask questions in question period and sit on committees, but he's got no bargaining power whatsoever to influence the Higgs government. And that really was his argument, what he was able to do the last 2 years. So there is that problem for him, I guess, in the next 4 years.
The People's Alliance losing that edge. For the Progressive Conservatives, though, probably some relief that they don't have to necessarily negotiate with the People's Alliance to achieve their legislative agenda. Let's go to PC Party headquarters. Connell Smith standing by with the guests there. Connell.
Hi, Harry. The crowd here didn't turn out like they expected. It was. I found out a little bit more about that. It was invitation only. You were not allowed to bring your spouse, and a lot of people, I'm told, decided that it was just not safe to go and join a large number of people in a hall. But the true believers are here. A lot of the party organizers and volunteers are here, including former New Brunswick Transportation Minister and PC Party President Claude Williams. And he's here right now. I wanted to ask, first of all, your reaction, the number of votes received here.
Well, my first reaction, I'm happy to see that New Brunswickers elected a majority progressive conservative government. So I think we are seeing stability, continuity with a Blaine Higgs government. So I think this is going to be good going forward, because as Blaine Higgs campaigned that he wants to be premier for the whole province of New Brunswick.
Now, if looking at the breakdown of the vote, we still have a fairly sharp divide between the Francophone ridings and how the vote went there. What do you make of that?
Well, it's unfortunate that we see again the color of the map as I guess as we've seen back in 2018. It's a repeat again this year. It's unfortunate, but look, we got to respect the vote of the population. People decided. The Francophone decided to vote Liberal, and we got to respect that. But again, I think it would have been good that we would have seen more Francophone to get elected and be part of this government. But again, the Premier will work hard to unite the province and to do the best for all New Brunswickers.
What's the biggest issue with Francophone voters here that didn't bring more of those seats over?
Well, as we've heard along the campaign, the word was out that the Acadian and the French people, they belong to the Liberal Party. I think we got to change that, because there's a lot of French people, French-speaking people, Acadian, that are part of the other parties. So I guess we got to change that. But we've heard a lot during this campaign that there's some fear about the Premier not listening to the Francophone community. I think we got to break that, because that is not true. The Premier is the Premier for all New Brunswick, and I guess now, at least with the majority, he will prove to New Brunswicker that he's there for the whole province.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
You're welcome.
I'll throw it back to you, Harry.
All right, thank you for that, Connell. Connell Smith at PC Party headquarters. We'll hear more from them later in the evening, I'm sure. Jacques, you have some results to talk about.
Yeah, let's look at three ridings around Fredericton where PC cabinet ministers have been re-elected. In Oromocto, Lincoln, Fredericton, the Liberals had high hopes for businessman Stephen Burns as a possible breakthrough in the area, but Mary Wilson, the minister in charge of economic development, winning quite handily there. Going next to New Maryland, Sunbury. This is Jeff Carr. Sorry, I'm confusing my Carrs. There have been so many from this family. Yes. Three brothers have been in the legislature at various times, but Jeff Carr with really a huge win in his riding. He's the Environment and Local Government Minister. And, of course, Dominic Carty, who we were talking about earlier, the Education Minister, but also the minister who was really out front, ahead of the curve in New Brunswick, ahead of just about everyone else on COVID-19, racking up an enormous win. And you have to think that people associate him with that early COVID-19 response, which a lot of people, credit in part for our relatively good case numbers. So a big, big win there for Dominic Carty. Absolutely. Dominic Carty sharing in that reputation for dealing with the crisis. We were talking before about Ted Fleming, the health minister, not being all that evident on that story. Dominic Carty really sharing that with Premier Blaine Higgs.
Well, I would even argue that he really owned that decision. I mean, that announcement came from him. The people were almost caught everybody off guard. First of all, the decision to close for a couple of weeks, and then the decision not to send students back. Let's sorry to interrupt you, Rachel. Let's go down to Green Party headquarters and David Kuhn.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Good evening, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Bonsoir tout le monde. I want to start off by acknowledging, of course, that we are gathered here today or tonight on the traditional territories, unceded territories of the Wostegwe people. And I will say tonight, we will continue to fight for an inquiry into the systemic racism in our justice and police systems on behalf of the Indigenous people from all over this province. Before I start, I also want to say, to acknowledge the pain and loss of the families whose loved ones died in the tragic accidents in Hanimal, Blackville, and Belle Isle Bay over the past couple of days. Our thoughts and prayers are with you all. This election certainly was one for the history books. A pandemic, a public health emergency, and here we were in an election campaign. We were challenged to campaign in new and creative ways, and our candidates across this province stood up and did exactly that, effectively campaigning safely, keeping everyone safe and healthy and secure, but campaign in very creative ways. Cette élection est certainement une pour les livres d'histoire. Nous avons été mis au défi de faire campagne avec des nouveaux moyens créatifs pour que chacun se sente en toute sécurité pendant la campagne. And we want everyone to feel safe during the pandemic. To Blaine Higgs for securing, for forming government, and I'll be looking to sit down with him at the earliest opportunity to discuss our ideas for addressing pressing priorities in this province. And I look forward to continuing to contribute to the work of the COVID-19 Cabinet Committee to help keep all New Brunswickers safe, secure, and healthy. I want to say thank you to the people of Fredericton South for your confidence in me to continue working hard for you, and I can't wait to get back to doing the job you've elected me to do, to continue to work hard on your behalf for all of the issues that are so important in this city. Solving the homelessness problem, addressing health care, and ensuring we get both the performing arts center a capital city like ours deserves and an aquatic center that a capital city like ours should have. Thank you and grand merci to all of the committed, hardworking members of the campaign teams and volunteers of both my local campaign and the provincial team. Volunteers and the campaign team members, you have been incredible. You've worked so hard, and I can't thank you enough for all the work you've done, for your commitment, for the endless hours you've devoted, the time you've taken away from your families and your loved ones. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Merci beaucoup.
And David Kuhn thanking his supporters there for returning him in the Fredericton South riding, in fact returning all 3 Green seats to the legislature tonight, saying that leading off by speaking directly to the issue of systemic racism in the justice system in this province, an issue that was certainly brought up by Indigenous groups and leaders in New Brunswick as something that needed to be dealt with. Blaine Higgs appeared to be resistant to that. David Kuhn committing himself to that and his party to pursuing that. Really not a bad night for David Kuhn and the Greens. They managed to get 15% of the vote. That's up about 3%. They maintained the 3 seats they have. And you can get a sense that there was, with the number of candidates they fielded, Jacques, a sense that they were well spread across the province and are showing support, just not deep enough yet to return more seats.
Yeah, there's good news and there's bad news. I mean, they held what they had, so they haven't taken any step backwards. Of course, they would have loved to get more seats, and they would have loved to have been really holding the balance of power. You know, had the alliance faded and Higgs not got a majority, the Greens really could have been kingmakers in this legislature. So that is a lost opportunity. But the party is positioned to, you know, really create headaches for the Liberals, frankly, and become more and more of an alternative for people who don't want to vote PC. So there's a bigger story shaping up there in that dynamic.
And certainly for the NDP as well, because the Greens have so outflanked the NDP, one wonders if the party can even continue to exist. So we'll probably hear from Mackenzie Thomason, the still interim leader of the NDP, who led the party into this campaign. We'll hear about that later. Let's go back to Terry Seke, standing by with another guest. Terry.
Thank you, Harry. I was just saying to Katie Davey that, boy, we haven't talked in years, and then twice on the same night. Katie Davey is the creator of the podcast Femme Wonk. That is a policy and current affairs podcast, and she has a degree in political science. Hi again, Ms. Davey.
Hello, nice to chat again.
So what are the observations and the points that you wanted to make about what you've seen so far?
So I think one of the really big positives and the things that we can celebrate in this election is the fact that it does look like we'll have a historic amount of women elected. Right now, I think it's 14 either elected or leading. That's fantastic. That, again, is historic. It turns us to about 28%. Still far too low, but it is a step in the right direction. However, I'll note that it does look like voter turnout is going to be down this election. I think we're right now at about 63%. In 2018, it was 67%. I don't think that's entirely surprising based on the fact that we were in a pandemic and, of course, people are focused on back to school as well. But I want to reiterate, I think, a number of points that folks have already raised on the coverage today, which is, in some ways, it's great that we have more women elected, but at the same time, these issues of systemic racism, Black Lives Matter, women's reproductive health care need to be raised. And it doesn't matter necessarily if we have 14 women elected if they're not going to bring those perspectives and those voices to the legislature. So fingers crossed that they do, but I just wanted to make sure that that is abundantly clear as well.
How much movement would you expect to see on those issues from the government?
Well, seeing as how there was very little movement on those issues from the government when it was in a minority situation, I'm not optimistic. That being said, I think this election has shown that there is tremendous grassroots support for those 3 issues that I mentioned. So hopefully the grassroots will also hold the government's feet to the fire. And I think the third party can also, the Green Party rather, will also do that. And hopefully the Liberals will see that as well.
I want to ask you about something that came up in Connell's interview a few moments ago, and that was the political divide in New Brunswick is also a linguistic divide. What are the ramifications you see in that division?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously something we've been seeing for forever, and I'm not trying to suck up to Jacques here with his book behind me. I actually just recently used it as Massachusetts. But this is not an issue that's new to New Brunswick. However, it's one that is being both as exasperated by language lines, but also these other divides that we're seeing in our communities. There needs to be a larger conversation of unity that factors in language, that factors in diversity, that factors in gender, and that really is rooted, I think, in empathy and shared experience. I think, New Brunswick is such a small place, yet so many of us haven't actually traveled to kind of the four corners. And I think we really all can do a bit more ourselves to develop that shared empathy. And hopefully our premier will do the same.
How does that conversation begin? Who has the responsibility to take the initiative?
So I think we all personally have the responsibility. What sometimes will happen is folks will put that responsibility on the people that are already experiencing whether they're already experiencing the challenges, and then we're putting that on them. I think what we can all individually do is be uncomfortable and be okay with taking the first steps forward and recognizing that sometimes we might be called out for saying the wrong thing. But if we're all kind of engaging together meaningfully and coming from the right place, then I think hopefully we can start moving forward and healing some of these divides.
Ms. Davey, thanks for giving us more of your time tonight.
It's my pleasure.
Much appreciated. Katie Davey, creator of the podcast Femme Wonk. Back to you, Harry.
All right, Terry, thank you for that. I want to take a look now at the summary of the People's Alliance vote and how it broke down around the province. Really, the greatest strength was in southern New Brunswick and western New Brunswick, but and Miramichi at more than 28% there. But you can see the lack of support in Moncton, in St. John, in eastern New Brunswick, and of course in northern New Brunswick. So basically down everywhere except the city, except in Moncton. Chris Austin, the re-elected leader of the People's Alliance, is standing by. Let's have a chat with him. Chris Austin, what do you take from, well, first of all, congratulations on winning your seat, but as you said, not exactly the kind of night you wanted to have.
No, certainly not. I mean, it's a bittersweet moment. We all worked very hard, as the other parties did during this campaign, to get our message out. Very pleased to see Michelle Conroy. You've got a rookie MLA that took out a former cabinet minister that now has defeated the Liberal leader. She's a down-to-earth girl that just works hard in Miramichi, and it paid off for her. Very thankful for my supporters in Fredericton Grand Lake, but at the same time, we are very sad to lose Rick. Rick DeSaulnier worked very hard in his riding. He was a great part of the team. But you know what? New Brunswickers have spoken. We respect their decision. And while we were hoping for more and hoping for the minority, it didn't pan out that way. But we will work with government as best we can to ensure that the right decisions are made as we move into the future.
There was a perception through the campaign that it took the People's Alliance time to really get out and get the campaign started. What was going on the first couple of weeks of the campaign?
Well, with the snap election, it kind of, we knew something was coming. I mean, obviously I was in negotiations with the other party leaders, so, I could see that it wasn't going anywhere short way through. So we did try to get the wheels moving at that point. By 4 or 5 days into the campaign, we had candidates lined up. We were starting to get the message out and starting to roll around the province to get that message. But really, Harry, at the end of the day, this was a different campaign. We built our party on grassroots level campaign style, door to door, eyeball to eyeball, to get our message out. And when you can't do that, the message can easily get muddied. And people don't really know where you're coming from.
You're saying you were undone by COVID-19.
Well, in a sense, and again, it's a fact that we had to campaign in the midst of a pandemic, and it was clearly the number one issue. I think that's what saw the majority go. But it is the wishes of New Brunswickers. We respect that, and we'll continue to work with government as best we can to make sure that our ideas and policies, help guide the decisions of government.
Give me your assessment of Blaine Higgs' strategy in calling the election and now emerging from it with exactly what he wanted, a majority government. Pretty smart.
Well, look, it was a risk that he took. It did pay off for him. At the time, I didn't feel like New Brunswickers were ready for an election. I'll be curious to see exactly what the voter turnout was when all the polls are in. But clearly he made the right decision for his ability to govern under a majority. And again, we respect the wishes of New Brunswickers. We've made a lot of relationships with government over the years. I've made, I think personally, a good relationship with Mr. Higgs. And, we're going to use that to try to get some of our ideas into government. But at the same time, we are here to play the part of opposition as well and ensure the government does the right thing.
How do you pursue that? How do you say, as you said, you've still got your foot in the door. How do you get the other foot in the door and pry it open a little bit? On what policies can you approach Blaine Higgs and say, we know you have a majority, but we can still help you?
Well, we're back to the traditional sense of how the legislature operates. I mean, by being in a majority government is the way it's been run for 100 years. So it's really about, again, getting the best ideas out there, getting public pressure to be put on government if it's something that the public sees as the best course of action. And we'll use that, to try to persuade government. But again, it's different in a majority. It's more about the power of persuasion than it is having the leverage in a minority where you have clearly a bigger hammer. So we'll use our persuasive ability as best we can to try to guide government, in decisions that we think are right.
And how committed are you, Chris Austin, to staying as leader of the party, leading the People's Alliance, and where do you begin to rebuild?
Well, that's a good question. It's a question I'm not prepared to answer tonight. It's something we're going to have to take some time, reevaluate, see what went right, what went wrong, and then see where we go from there.
Well, Chris Austin, good to talk to you. Thank you very much. And again, congratulations on winning your seat.
Great. Thank you, Harry.
All the best. Chris Austin, the leader of the People's Alliance there. That ability to negotiate with the government was a toehold the People's Alliance and the Greens had when Blaine Higgs was leading a minority government. That's gone now. So more difficult for them to be relevant to the government led by Blaine Higgs.
One visual I'll be watching for in the legislature is the seating arrangement, because of the numbers and the rooms off where the different parties use as their back rooms, the Alliance was actually sitting on the government side of the House. Very symbolic of this working arrangement. Now we may see the Alliance over in the opposition benches again.
Well, here's the victory walk, punching the air. Blaine Higgs with a visor on to of course, avoid COVID-19, but walking through PC party headquarters, thumbs up, a happy man. His strategy of calling an election at this point in time that was so roundly criticized by so many worked in his favor. He achieved pretty well what he set out to do. Boosting his seat count, gaining a majority government, not having necessarily to negotiate with the Greens and the PAs and the Liberals to achieve what he wants.
The night he won the leadership, a political scientist said the Liberals would be popping champagne because this guy could not get elected Premier in New Brunswick.
Well, here's a guy who's been kept on a short leash, as I said, by first his own government as Finance Minister and David Alward's government, and then by a minority government. He's finally off that leash, able to do pretty well what he wants to. And, Rachel, there's, I'm sure, a long list of things that he wants to achieve.
Yeah, there's some tough files that we haven't even talked about tonight. Yeah. We haven't talked about resource extraction. We haven't talked about fracking. We haven't talked about rural regions paying more to help cities. We haven't talked about removing tax breaks for heavy industry. We haven't talked about the glyphosate ban. So it'll be interesting to see what a majority government PCs do without having to answer to anyone.
Yeah, it's going to be a busy time for Blaine Higgs. But again, having the luxury as Premier, with the government large enough to command a majority, he can pick and choose what he's going to deal with, where he's going to start, and not have to negotiate to get what he wants.
Yeah, one of the first questions I think will be next spring's budget. We'll see where we are with COVID by then, but a huge budget deficit this year because of COVID. How fast does he want to get back to a balanced budget? He wouldn't commit to it during the election. He said it would be irresponsible to promise a balanced budget in the next 4 years. But you have to think that as those interim spending measures start to come off, and as the economy revives, assuming that there's a vaccine sometime next year, that he will renew that push to get the finances in order again.
One wonders, too, how he will deal with the federal government. The relationship he has had with the feds up to this point a little shaky by times, not necessarily an arrangement of equals. We'll have to see. So right now, Blaine Higgs looking at a video that the party produced there and walking with his wife up to the...
And on that point, quickly, now Blaine Higgs has a majority and Justin Trudeau doesn't.
Yes, yes, indeed. And Blaine Higgs, this way, there's some flashing elbows in the COVID shake as he approaches, we hope, the microphones to give his victory speech.
Thank you very much. Nothing like coming to a packed hall. This is life in COVID. Yeah, great night. And look, I just thanks everyone so much because I know everyone has worked hard. It certainly was I think a testament to our province and our capabilities and working within COVID. Once again, I think we're on the national scene in looking at how we can keep moving forward and progressing as a province. And I'm really excited about that. Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. It's been an exciting evening. At least it won't take 5 weeks to know who's going to be in government. You know, we lost some valuable time last time. Mes chers amis, chers gens de New Brunswick, fellow New Brunswickers, tonight the road is clear. Nous voyons plus clair maintenant. Tonight we find ourselves with more certainty than ever before. It's a certainty that comes from knowing New Brunswickers want us to seize the momentum that we have right now and keep building. It's a certainty that comes from knowing New Brunswickers want us to keep aiming higher, to keep this province moving forward, safely, with focus, with stability, and with results. And I'm excited about tonight's results. Ce soir, nous renouvelons nos engagements.
We are renewing our commitments
les gens de la province et de réaliser
to the people of New Brunswick and to carry out our program. New Brunswickers voted for a team that is prepared to lead with proven results, a team that can make the difficult decisions in a fair manner to allow our province to move ahead.
To each other and to our government's plan. New Brunswickers have voted for leadership that is prepared, for leadership that has been tested and will continue to be tested, and for leadership that will make tough and balanced decisions to keep our province moving forward. Come what may in the months and the years ahead, we know we'll have stability and experience leading us through these challenging times. I want to thank every New Brunswicker who showed the country how democratic elections can be held safely during this pandemic. In this election, you, the people of New Brunswick, showed everyone that we are stronger together. You reminded us that we vote in advance. Thank you for that.
I want to thank all the people of New Brunswick who showed that we can hold democratic elections during a pandemic. In this election, the people of New Brunswick showed us that we are stronger together. People voted early in historic numbers this time. We followed the rules. We paid attention to the safety of others, and I want to thank you for that.
It's just another example of how the people of New Brunswick are ready to lead. I also want to thank the people of my riding of Quispamsis. You first elected me in 2010, and I have been honored to be your voice in Fredericton over the last decade.
And I want to particularly comment about my dedicated team of volunteers in this and in every election. Many of you have been there from the very beginning and continue to be supporting. It's a humbling experience and one that I'm deeply, deeply appreciated for your great efforts. And one of the things that I've said in the last election, you know, the vote count was higher when I wasn't here. And then this election, it was higher and we never knocked on a door. So I think elections are changing in Canada now and in our province. Public service is a privilege like none other. And I'm humbled to serve you again for 4 more years as MLA and as Premier. Avant de me joindre à vous ce soir, j'ai parlé avec Kevin Vickers.
Before I came to you tonight, I spoke to Kevin Vickers and I thanked him for his commitment to serve the public.
Before joining you tonight, I spoke to Kevin Vickers and I thanked him for his commitment to public service, his service to Canada. And I told him how grateful I was that he participated. And I know it's been a tough night. While we may have differences, we have many things in common. And at the top of the list is that we care about New Brunswick. I look forward to continue to work with all parties on the Cabinet COVID Committee.
I also want to express my gratitude to Chris Austin, to Mackenzie Thomason, and to David Kuhn, as well as all the other candidates who ran in this election for their party. It is my desire to serve the province, and we are very grateful to all.
I also want to express my gratitude to Chris Austin and David Kuhn and Mackenzie Thompson, and to all of the candidates across the province, no matter what party they ran for. Your desire to serve our province is what makes us strong, makes a strong democracy, and we are all better for it. To my campaign team and all of our candidates who ran for the Progressive Conservative in this election, and I believe we've elected 9 women as MLAs, and that is the highest in the PC history in this province. So that's great news. We had the most diverse slate of candidates in the history of our party in this province, and we are much, much stronger for it. And of course, I want to thank my family, whose support really knows no bounds. For Marcia and I, this time spent serving our province is about building a better tomorrow. That's why we made our home here and raised our daughters here. We want future generations to have that same opportunity. I am confident that day will come. We are well on our way. We've seen so much success already before COVID and in our response to COVID. We've seen innovation. We've seen perseverance. We've seen compassion. Right across this province, we've seen the best of people. And I know this is only the beginning. I have witnessed firsthand, especially through the COVID experience, the innovation, capability, and pride of service that every employee of the province of New Brunswick has. And I can just imagine what more we can achieve, because together we will look for those innovative ideas to move us forward.
We have seen innovation, perseverance, and compassion. Throughout the province, we saw people who have given the best of themselves. And this is only the beginning.
This is a critical turning point for our province. There is much work to do, and I commit that I will continue to put province before politics. I will continue to be inclusive and collaborative. North, south, urban, rural. Our government will continue to be focused on helping all regions succeed.
I will continue to be a collaborator, whether it is the urban regions, the rural regions, the north or the south. The critical goal of our government will be to help all the regions of the province as best we can. No region will be left on its own.
Together we will recover. Together we will realize our potential. And together we will rise to new heights. I am sure the best is yet to come, and we are up to the job to deliver. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Higgs, a victory speech, a rallying cry, call it what you will, but Blaine Higgs vanquishing the doubters, dismissing the hangers-on, leading his party in what turned out to be really a referendum of his leadership. The parties he faced, the opposition parties, couldn't drag the campaign down any other lane and had to fight him on his terms, it appears. The opposition essentially had nothing to bring him down with.
It's interesting that he talked about the COVID-19 committee, which we were wondering about earlier. So it does seem he plans to continue that, and at least rhetorically says that he wants to continue to not be a conventional politician in the way he governs. Of course, now that he has that majority, he'll probably face some push from within his party and within his caucus to be a bit more political because he can afford it. But we are hearing those same notes we heard before of not getting partisan, doing the best thing, and
putting province before politics.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Promising to be collaborative. You know, the promise to look after the urban regions, the rural regions, the north, the south. He didn't specifically address the Franco-Anglo divide in the province, but he did say no region would be left on its own.
No, yeah, and it could be by design. I mean, to be, as some Francophones would say, tepid on this, it may have successfully drawn some vote away from the People's Alliance, diffused that what they use for their campaigning, and if he is not considered. You know, if he doesn't fire up over the next 4 years, if he's careful and doesn't fire up divisions, you know, he won't again. The People's Alliance may have trouble trying to find fuel to rebuild.
It's a tough balancing act because yes, he may be keeping that sentiment tamped down, but the division is there in other ways, and I would have thought maybe we would have heard a bit more from him rhetorically, speaking directly to Francophones, not just as a northern region, but as a culture. You know, I know that I need to do more to win your trust, something along those lines. So that was a striking omission, although there was that acknowledgement, you know, no region will be left behind, that there is a political challenge for him there.
And the acknowledgement too, with 9 women in the caucus now, he has the highest number of women in a PC government. So presumably he'll make some gains there as well.
Yeah, he could do Bernard Lord in 2003 and put them all in cabinet. But you know, I thought I heard him mention, correct me if I'm wrong, that he had the most diverse slate or something to that effect. But I'm not sure how he measures that. Yes,
I think that was the most diverse slate for any PC offering in the province ever.
Because they did not. I mean, it has to be pointed out, they did not run candidates of color, and nor did they have Indigenous candidates in 2020.
Interesting. Well, Blaine Higgs claiming victory and issuing a rallying cry, as I said, to the province to get people to work together. It'll be interesting to see how he does that going forward with the Liberals, with the Greens, and with the People's Alliance. How much time he'll spend, you know, building bridges and bringing them in, if at all. We didn't hear about you know, some of the key issues people had suspected: fracking, energy production, some of the things that Blaine Higgs championed in the David Alward government, but has been very quiet about in the past 2 years. Let's go now to where are we going to go now? So Rachel, you've got some results here. Let's take a closer look at how some of these returns.
Nice to get to all the ridings in the night. Gagetown, Petitcodiac, Ross Wetmore re-elected there. Look at by that margin, almost 3,500 votes over the People's Alliance. Craig Dykeman and the Greens in third there. And I think Sussex, Fundy, St. Martin's. So this is Tammy Scott Wallace. Elected where Bruce Northrup left off. And what's interesting here is that the PCs did not seem to pay a price at all for trying to close the hospital in Sussex. Can't forget Bruce Northrop facing off against those very angry crowds, but it didn't cost the PCs here. And in Kings Centre, Bill Oliver, Transportation Minister, re-elected with a margin of over 3,300 votes. The Greens in second there.
Yeah. Jacques.
Yeah, we've got some other results here as well of some more Progressive Conservatives re-elected. Jake Stewart, who squeaked out with less than 100 votes last time, now really a comfortable win by more than 1,600 votes in southwest Miramichi Bay, Devon, one of the largest ridings geographically in the province, and the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs. Of course, his mind was on that tragic accident in Blackville where he's from in the last day, but he is back elected comfortably, which I'm sure he'll be happy about. Ernie Steeves in Moncton Northwest, the finance minister, the man with the golden voice, former private radio man, with a big role in the Higgs government until now. A big win for him. That was a close one last time, but not this time. And finally in Riverview, a PC bastion really, and Bruce Fitch, who was left out of the Higgs cabinet until the last few months when he went back in as a tourism, culture and heritage minister. Another comfortable win in a very PC riding. Bruce Fitch wins by 3,400 votes. Wow, big win.
And presumably plenty of people to pick from to form a cabinet.
That's right. There's all kinds of veterans. I mean, all the veterans, as we've seen, that chose to run again are back, so lots to choose from. But a lot of women, 9 women, a lot of younger people. In Fredericton, York, Tammy Scott Wallace and Sussex Fundy St. Martin's, you know, a real refreshing of the PC caucus there. Maybe we will see some turnover, maybe some MLAs who are older and maybe a little more sprightly, not as sprightly, will choose to pass the torch to some of these younger PC MLAs.
And it will be interesting to see how, in a sense, how bullish this makes the Progressive Conservatives as they return to the legislature in terms of being in control of their own agenda, being able to get legislation passed without having to rely on the smaller parties. Blaine Higgs has chafed for a long time, as I said earlier, when he was in the David Alward government as finance minister. He often complained that he couldn't get his cabinet colleagues to go along with what he felt were important and easy tasks to reduce the debt. Then, as a minority government leader, he had to negotiate. Now he doesn't have to do that.
We even saw in his cabinet in the last 2 years some ministers who came to blows with each other. Dominic Cardy and Andrea Anderson-Mason on vaccines. Jake Stewart made some noise about the inquiry. He said he would push for it. Ministers kind of pushing the envelope a bit because they knew that Blaine Higgs couldn't afford to lose any of them. Now he's got a majority. He's got a firmer hand and may bring his own cabinet to heal as well.
Well, that's right. So it'll be interesting to see if they are, if he is more aggressive with his own cabinet ministers. You take someone like Dominic Cardy, put them in your cabinet, and he is aggressive, he's demanding, he's insistent. And as the premier, as the leader of the party, you have to manage that somehow. So one wonders if Dominic Cardy might not be a little more humble returning to the legislature with Blaine Higgs and a majority government.
Well, one thing he's really got to figure out is health care. We've got some real problems that have been brewing that COVID-19 has either brought to light or made us not talk about because we're too preoccupied with other things. But he's got thousands of New Brunswickers that still don't have family doctors. He's got obstetrics closing in Campbellton. He's got, he says that he's going to reduce waiting times for certain surgeries, but he's got a healthcare budget that is eating up increasingly every year the money that we have, and he's got to get something imaginative, really transformative, and then he's got to make it happen.
I'll be interested in seeing how he manages the health authorities, because if I understood correctly, the plan to close the emergency rooms overnight, that came from Vitalite, did it not?
It came from
both. He got wrong-footed by Horizon Health on the abortion clinic.
That's right. The hospital reform plan came from the two RHAs, and they continued to stand by it even after it went down in flames. So it'll be interesting to see if they bring it back. Tammy Scott Wallace, the candidate now elected in Sussex Fundy St. Martin's, said at a debate last week in the riding that there still has to be conversations about the local hospital. So we'll see what those conversations are going to be.
Kevin Vickers, the leader of the Liberal Party, was not able to bring to the table what many hoped he would with his fame coming back to his home province of New Brunswick. Let's go to Miramichi now, where Kevin Vickers is standing by. Mr. Vickers, tough night. Tell me about it.
First of all, Harry, great to hear your voice, and thank you for having me on this evening. Yeah, no, it is a tough evening. Obviously, we would have preferred the results being different, but obviously the people of New Brunswick have spoken. They've made a clear decision, given Premier Higgs and his government a majority government, and now it's important that the Liberal Party move on, and that we obviously will be in a building process, but most importantly, I want to assure New Brunswickers that I know with our Liberal values that we will work with Premier Higgs and his government in a spirit of collaboration for the benefit of all New Brunswickers.
You were declared leader, sir, in April of 2019. 18 months ago, was that not enough time to get back to New Brunswick, to understand what mattered and was important, not just to Liberals, but to other voters as well?
Well, Harry, you know, the reason that one of the big reasons that I decided to come home is I received calls from our Acadian friends and asked me to see what I could do as an Anglophone bilingual to help bring our province together. And that was a big motivation of mine, was to come back and have our province and do what I could to have our province come together. And obviously that's not turned out the way I had planned, but perhaps there'll be other ways in the future that I can involve myself in trying to ensure that our province, our beautiful province, comes together as one, and I look forward to those challenges.
Mr. Vickers, you fought a good fight. Do you plan to stay on as leader of the party? Will you stay with the Liberal Party?
No, I'll be stepping down, Harry. I'll be stepping down this evening. Obviously, as results of this evening, it's time for another leader to step up and take the party forward. I'm very proud of my achievements. I think I've reunited our party a great deal after the previous election, bringing many people back home to the Liberal Party, and we've identified, and I'm so proud of the candidates that we were able to put forward in our election this time. I mean, incredible, talented, brilliant New Brunswickers, and I'm so proud of that. So I see that as a real accomplishment, and I'm hoping that the next leader, again, will take the torch and bring it up higher. But again, as I want to reiterate, New Brunswickers have spoken. We totally respect the decision of our citizens, and we'll do whatever we can to move the agenda forward that they have given to Premier Higgs and his government.
Sir, if you would humor me for just a moment, I want to take you back to that period of time where you were negotiating with the government and with the other parties, trying to find a way to keep the government in power or to keep the parties involved. You walked out of those negotiations. In retrospect, was that a mistake?
I don't believe so, Harry. You know, Mr. Higgs had certain plans that he wanted to bring forth, and we did not feel in a democracy that we would sit back and allow the role of official opposition to be set aside. He had come forward with big plans and transformation of healthcare system, education system, municipal reform, and we just didn't feel that he ever had a mandate to take and act upon those major issues. And in fact, what we would have been doing was giving a minority government who never had that mandate a majority government power without opposition. So I think for the good of democracy, it was the right thing to do. And obviously today there's an election, and he has a mandate for what he's run on his current platform.
You were acclaimed as leader of the party. There was no party conference where policies could be hammered out. Did you miss out on that in a sense? Those are usually formative periods for leaders. Would you have benefited from that, do you think?
I'm sure, those opportunities would. I was very disappointed I didn't get to run in a by-election and have that experience and have some time in the legislature prior to an election of this nature. But that's what life is, and you deal with the cards that you're dealt. And again, there's no time here for me to be sympathetic. I'm very proud of what I've done. I've worked hard. I've worked tirelessly to bring our party back together again. And as I say, my ultimate goal was really to try to unite our province and bring our cultures together. I have great inroads in the Francophone community, but especially our First Nations community, which I was really looking forward to doing some really different things with. I'd mentioned that I would like to have a First Nations person in my cabinet if ever I had been elected as Premier, so that they would be involved from at a very concrete level on any initiative that would be an inclusive government where we'd have all our three communities at the big table.
So what does your future hold now, Mr. Vickers? Are you completely done with politics of all kinds at all levels?
Well, I certainly, for the interim, they always say never, Harry. But as I say, these things are very dear to my heart. This province is very dear to my heart, and I really wanted to do my level best to bring our peoples together. My dad has worked here, Bill Vickers, with Northumberland Co-op Dairy with a gentleman by the name of Martin Legier up in Caracat, and Dad didn't speak French, but he and Martin worked tirelessly promoting the co-op movement and the credit union and raising New Brunswickers up out of poverty and giving them hope and opportunity. And so perhaps that path would be a more productive path for me to take in trying to bring us all together.
Well, Mr. Vickers, no one could underestimate, a round of applause there. No one could underestimate the pain of loss like this and the difficulty, and I just want to say thank you for talking to us. Thank you for your service to the public as well, sir.
Mr. Forestell, I want to thank you for your service and all the journalists during this election. I know how tirelessly you've worked and added and strengthened our democracy in our province, and I thank all New Brunswickers tonight for having voted and taken the time in this important and crucial step in our democracy.
All right, Mr. Vickers, good night and good luck.
Thank you very much, Harry.
That's Kevin Vickers, the soon-to-be former leader of the Provincial Liberal Party, acknowledging that he had not achieved the goals that they had set in this election, and he will be withdrawing as leader of the party immediately.
It's quite a thing. He was the star, and no one, I think, questioned his earnestness, his sincerity. But there was a process behind the scenes that happened with this that came together very fast, as we talked about. Word kind of went out that he might be interested. Someone in Miramichi, Neguac area got excited, talked to some other people in the party locally. They mentioned it to some other people in the party establishment, and it just took off. It just snowballed to the point that everyone else got out of the way. But very quickly after the acclamation, we did hear people begin to express concern that he hadn't been tested, that he wasn't smooth on the stump, and then there was no policy convention, no ferment of ideas, and it's in a way it's unfortunate for Kevin Vickers, who had that heroic moment, was sent off to Ireland as ambassador, something he obviously cherished and talks about a lot.
Yeah.
And then to have a kind of end note that's a letdown is you know, you like to go out on a high note from public life, not on a note like this.
No, absolutely. You know, the choice of Kevin Vickers as the Liberal leader, coming as it did, seemed a little too pat. You know, there seemed to be the thinking that his profile as the hero of Parliament Hill on that day so many years ago would be enough to carry him to victory. And it clearly wasn't. So there was either an underestimation of New Brunswick voters and their skill at picking leaders, or an overabundance of confidence that was all Kevin Vickers would need.
Or a breach on behalf of the Liberal Party that they weren't starting to get ready for life after Brian Gallant, that they even had a period of interim leader where they just didn't seem, I mean, to have Kevin Vickers in by acclamation, to not even contest it. And where are we now?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't. Does a name leap to mind? I'm not sure.
Well, we can talk about that later. But just on that point, I mean, the Liberals have to really rethink who they are and where they are now with this green, growth on their left, with the PCs winning in the urban centres. I mean, the Liberals were kind of the party of the centre left and the party that was more urban or, supposedly cosmopolitan, but it's really the PCs that are on that terrain, and the Greens are on the left terrain. So the Liberals need one of these big rethinks that the federal Liberal Party does every 20 or 30 years to figure out who they are and what they're about.
Well, while they're having that big rethink, Blaine Higgs is going to be a busy man, and in fact, Blaine Higgs, re-elected, joins us now from the PC Party headquarters in Quispamsis. Mr. Higgs, congratulations. You must feel good tonight.
Yes, Harry, thank you very much. It does feel good, and I'm humbled by the support that the province has shown in our government and my leadership, and looking forward to carrying on with the plan we put in place back in March and with stability in our government to do so.
Well, let's talk about the election plan, because it seems as though you set this goal and headed straight for it. Nobody could derail the campaign. How do you see the campaign you ran?
Well, interesting enough, Harry, it was a different campaign because you know that we stuck to our program that we put in place. Our announcements, people will say, well, we've heard this before. Yes, you did. You heard it at our budget speech. You heard it at our State of the Province address. And it was a plan we put in place. So it wasn't going to be derailed by a bunch of promises on the bus, even though we witnessed them every day coming from other parties, because New Brunswickers deserve better. We deserve a plan that does really reflect respect for the taxpayer dollars, and we had that plan. And so I think people may have been surprised that we didn't deviate from that on the campaign trail, but I think New Brunswickers were pleased that we stuck to our plan, and they're looking forward to stability as much as we are.
But in fairness, Mr. Higgs, this was never about voters looking at the Progressive Conservatives and saying, what a clever bunch of people they are, let's re-elect them as our government. In fact, it was more a case of looking at Blaine Higgs and the presence you occupied next to Dr. Russell through the COVID pandemic, through that health emergency, and the figure you cut as leader of the party. Is it fair to say, do you agree that this was more of a referendum on your leadership than it was on your party?
Well, I think every campaign is certainly a referendum on the leader, and we've all kind of gone through that. But it was an opportunity that I saw because we showed how good we could be working together. And yes, working with Dr. Russell, working with public health officials, health authorities from all over the province, and in every aspect. And our public safety folks, I mean, every aspect of people in the province, no matter what they did, they were doing it for New Brunswick. It became a mission we were all on. And what excited me is we can do that in so many other things. So it's not about any particular issue. It's about how good can we be in delivering results. And I'm excited about the quality of our civil servants and the people that are employed by the province, because I saw innovation like I'd never seen before with the system, an engaged workforce that's going to deliver more. And I didn't want to lose that, because it isn't about the PC party. You're right. It isn't about us as a particular party. It's about engaging people to be part of the provincial solution. We have great candidates all over, and I was very, very pleased with that. And certainly we had great candidates from all over the province. And they, we didn't elect as what we would hope to in the northern part of the province. And I say it quite often, and certainly it's not so much a language problem as it is a political problem. And unfortunately, for a long time now, the North has been considered a safe house for the Liberal Party. And I'm as hopeful that changes, and they recognize that we need all voices. But in the meantime, we will use the voices we have to represent the entire province.
How will you make that change?
Well, for me, I mean, I've been working with economic councils, the Conseil économique, and the municipalities and what they need. I met with the 8 cities, several times during my first 2 years, and we were looking at their priorities. So I'm not inventing these from Fredericton, whether it be municipal reform and changing the tax model and all that stuff. I want the municipalities to help us design what they need to prosper. Because we've seen for many, many generations, government invent this stuff, and it doesn't work. And so that's going to be the difference. And it doesn't matter whether I have a representative or not in this municipality. It matters that the municipality has a path and a plan for growth, and that we're supportive as a government and we make changes to follow that path.
A subject that never came up during the campaign is fracking. Is there a place for fracking under your government going forward?
Well, it's a sensitive issue for sure, and certainly it isn't anything that we have on the immediate radar. I am very concerned about going forward with our generally, and that's why it's been such an issue for me working with funding models that I would looking for funding support from the federal government, but to utilize the money that for things we actually need to build, or not just new stuff for the sake of spending money, but ensuring that we can actually keep taxes low or lower and not raise them. And that was my commitment. So, whether gas developments in the future or not, it isn't anything that's on the immediate radar. There may be a place at some point, and I guess I look at all facts at any time, and that's the way I look at anything. So I don't rule out anything, but there's no immediate plan to pursue that at this time.
Have you rethought your position on an inquiry into systemic racism in the justice system in this province?
Well, Harry, as you and I have talked recently, I mean, I believe that we do have systemic racism in our province and in other provinces. I also, when I met with the First Nations, proposed that we get together and let's start down a path of things we already know. 797 recommendations, and we've got less than 20% that have been done in the last 25 years. I mean, let's not just do a study for the sake of study. Let's decide what we already know and is recommended, and let's put an inquiry together on what is not known and how we can get better, because we all recognize the challenges. But it isn't unique to New Brunswick. It's a situation across the country. And so engaging the federal government but other provinces was always part of what I wanted to do, kind of a two-part path, that we could get action today and a plan, not just get caught up for the next 3 or 4 years in an inquiry process. So I still want to do that, and I still want to get together with the First Nations community and map out a path forward together.
And when you look at the political map of the province and see that solid red across the top, how do you go forward in building bridges with New Brunswick's French community?
Well, for me, Harry, I want people to see me as treating every citizen in this province fairly. So it isn't about doing something unique or different. It's about treating people fairly so that we all rise together. When I talk about the communities and the chambers and working with municipalities, it's what they need to have their community thrive and survive. And I believe if we make meaningful improvements and follow a plan that they are focused on, and we see the results, so people are moving back into these communities, like we've lost 20% of the population from the north. So the past hasn't worked, and the make-believe projects haven't worked. So let's put in real sustainable growth, not just competing with one region over another, but actually complementing each other. And that's the goal. And I feel people will see that. So it's not going to be anything more than, look, I want to work with every community and let's build a greater province. And we can only do that together, regardless of the political map.
You said you wanted stability. Well, you've got it now. When we talked a few days ago, I asked you what you would do with a majority government that you couldn't do with a minority government. Give me one thing that you're thinking about tonight that you now know you can act on without being inhibited by
certainly, I think one of the controversial items, Harry, during during the past 2 years was in talking about the health reforms. And for me, it was a mistake to go down and talk about the actual ERs and changing the hours, because that was never the issue. The issue is the challenge of meeting the service requirements that we must for our citizens. Every municipality that was involved in that particular situation had sent out a questionnaire, and the questionnaire was very, very clear but very reasonable, that they want to be part of the solution. They know we have challenges in our province, and they want to be part of the solution. You know, you can't ask for anything more than that. And I just, apologize for not providing all those facts. So what I'm going to do very clearly now, without, having other parties just kind of derail the process for the sake of being in opposition, is I'm going to meet with those communities. I'm going to share all the information about our challenges in not only healthcare, but economic growth and taxation, and just let's work together on this. So I think for many years, the government has invented solutions and then downloaded it, but ignoring the issues is not the answer. And I think so far people recognize that I look for solutions. I don't avoid challenges. I look for solutions. And that's been my motto from the beginning, and that will continue to be my motto. Laying out the issues and saying, we got to fix something. We can't ignore it. So let's get our heads together.
Well, you've got the next 4 years to do it. The man from Forest City has finally achieved the goal that he set out for. I bet your mom and your dad will be happy with this.
Well, Harry, interesting enough, I called Mom earlier this evening, and when all the results weren't in, but it was looking the same as it does now. And it's pretty special talking to your mom, and I was talking to my brother as well. But your mom she'll be 100 on December 31st, and it's pretty special to call Mom and say, what do you think? We're going to make it? And she says, it's looking good, son. Keep going.
Looking good. All right, well done. Blaine Higgs, listen, great to talk to you. Congratulations on another term of government, and thank you for taking the time to speak with us tonight.
You're very welcome, Harry. Thank you.
Good luck, sir. Blaine Higgs, the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party and the Premier of New Brunswick. So there you have it. Blaine Higgs, health care, #1 issue that he's going to deal with.
Indeed.
That doesn't mean that there won't be cuts.
No, he's for someone who wanted so badly to work with the other parties for 2 years, now they just seem to be something stuck to his pant leg that he wants to get rid of so he can go meet with those communities about their hospitals and their health care. Yeah, clearly he's going to move ahead. He said during the campaign he took the ERs off the table, but there are a lot of other things that can happen in healthcare, things that may not make some people happy. And I think from his tone there and his take on the opposition parties, it's pretty clear that some of those things may not be the most popular moves.
Rachel, when he talked about the North, the Francophone north of the province, what did you think of his argument there?
It reminds me of the earlier discussion we had about him not hearing or responding to the feeling that a minority language culture could feel threatened, that would need special protections and special policies to keep growing and thriving in when the dominant language could be English and the mass media culture is English. That he's not hearing that or responding to it. He's just saying everybody needs to be treated equal. He
seems to think that responding to it is a political thing, that it's caught up in old school politics, and that's something he doesn't want to do. And there are some politics to those gestures in the past, but it also is at a symbolic level, a recognition that people want to hear.
And that by promoting the economy, if we answer this at an economic level, if we reduce unemployment, like he mentioned, the unemployment in northern New Brunswick, somehow that will help fix it. Yeah. But he's not getting it at the cultural level.
Maeve McFadden is standing by. She has a guest with her to take a look at the future of the Liberal Party post Kevin Vickers. Maeve, who do you have with you?
Hi, thanks, Harry. Yes, I've got Stephanie Tomlinson here with me, and she's the co-chair of the Liberal campaign. Stephanie, thank you very much for sticking through with us here tonight.
Thank you.
Kevin Vickers, of course, now has lost a seat and has said that he will be stepping down as leader. What is your reaction to that news?
Well, I understand. It's a grind. I do wish that more people would have had the opportunity to meet Kevin. He's a lovely gentleman, a really good person, and someone who really cares about New Brunswick. I think at this point we just ran out of runway. There's only so many weeks to be able to get your message out there and of course get your new candidates out there as well, but we did the best we could, but this is where it lies tonight.
And so what's next for the Liberal Party in New Brunswick?
Well, the good thing is that it's a rebuild, right? It's a starting over, it's a starting fresh, and of course you have to take a look at what worked and what didn't and where did we go wrong, and have those really fierce conversations and really true conversations of what needs to be done in order to rebuild the party. And I'm quite excited about that. I love the idea of a rebuild. You know, we're very inclusive. We have a whole slate of candidates that are willing to come back and help us out, and we want to keep them involved with us, and we're open to everybody. We're looking for immigrants and minorities and women, and we want people to come and join with us, and we'll see where it goes from there. But it is exciting. It is a silver lining.
And what kind of a leader would you like to see take the Liberals forward in New Brunswick?
I would like to see someone that I've seen before that has a passion, that has a heart for New Brunswick, someone who is a connector and someone who looks after people. You have to have a heart for people to be in this field, I believe. So I'm really looking for someone that brings that passion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Harry, that's Stephanie Tomlinson, co-chair of the Liberal campaign here at Liberal headquarters in Fredericton.
All right, Maeve, thanks very much for that. Maeve McFadden at Liberal headquarters. Jacques Poitras, who is out there to replace Kevin Vickers?
Well, let's look at 3 MLAs in the caucus. Now, these are names I've heard. Other people will have other names, but 3 names that might be in contention. Rob McKee, fluently bilingual lawyer from Moncton, is someone with a good pedigree in the Liberal Party. His father was a cabinet minister, well-liked. Might be a bit early for him. A lot of people think he should wait, but you do hear his name. And then there's 2 women in the caucus. Lisa Harris from Miramichi Bay Negowac, re-elected tonight. Folksy, like there's no tomorrow, classic Miramichi politician. I've heard her name a bit. And third in the caucus is Isabelle Thériault from Caracat, who's a performer, comes from the theater and music world and has a good sense of theater when she's speaking to the media and speaking to a crowd. 2 other names that are out there. I've just been texting Wayne Long, the MP for St. John, who thought about it last time, and I said, care to comment? He said, just getting parked, give me a sec. And there's a bit of talk about Matt DeCourcy, the former MP from Fredericton as well. So those are some names. You know, you hear Dominic LeBlanc's name from time to time, but he's sitting pretty in Ottawa these days, so I'm not sure about that. And some people have actually mentioned Stephanie Tomlinson, who we just saw on the screen. So, you know, there are a lot of names out there, a lot of names inside the caucus, outside the caucus. A lot of people will look at it, but I think it also has to be part of that rethink of what is the Liberal Party? Where are they going? Center, left, moderate, further left, green? There's a lot to sort out beyond just who's at the head of the party.
One of the things we saw during that period of negotiations that the Liberals eventually withdrew from was Kevin Vickers going into those discussions saying some interesting points are being made, seeming initially positive. But then behind him, familiar Liberal faces who have been running the party contradicting him.
That it wasn't Kevin Vickers walking away, that it was other party members that were pulling him. Jacques, I would defer to Jacques because being at the legislature every day, I'm sure he'd be more inclined to hear what's going on in the hallways and outside. But
still waiting for Wayne.
You're still waiting for an answer from Wayne Long after he parks his car.
Call me.
But that could have been the naivete, perhaps, of being new to politics. You know, it's a whole different game than being in policing for decades.
The reason I mention that is because it's interesting to see newer names on that list. You know, when you talk about Isabelle Thériault and Rob McKee, you get the sense that the party has to sort of slough off the old guard and move forward to something new.
The other challenge for this caucus is in question period over the last couple of years, they've been very parochial and local. They've talked a lot about their own ridings, their own parts of the province. Some of these younger MLAs that are potential future leaders got to get out to St. John and Fredericton, take on some policy areas, some critic areas that are outside their own comfort zone and outside their own regional base, and make a case to the whole province that they also can represent the whole province.
All right, so the final results, the Progressive Conservatives elected in 27 ridings, the Liberals in 17, the Green held on to their 3 ridings, and the People's Alliance lost 1 but managed to hold on to 2. So there is the result. All seats have been counted, and it's been quite a night. Let's bring Terry Sege back here because he has a guest with him. Terry.
Thank you, Harry. So you guys aren't the only people who could do forecasting. We can do forecasting in the little studio as well. As you know, there was much discussion during the election campaign about the need for New Brunswick to attract more immigrants, to develop our economy. My guest now is able to speak to that. Monsef Laquesse is president of the New Brunswick Multicultural Council. Good evening, Mr. Laquesse. Welcome to the program.
Good evening, Terry. My pleasure.
First off, what's your assessment of this result?
This is something that we were all expecting. We knew from the polls and we knew from the direction where the polls were going that we were expecting a conservative government, and we're just debating if it was going to be a minority or majority. It is confirmed. We are having a majority government, and I'm extremely excited to definitely sit down and look into the future and talk about immigration.
Okay, how does that conversation go then?
Well, we know that this government is definitely looking to grow the economy and recover from a pandemic, and the way to do it is eventually to attract more immigrants. As we know, Moncton, the greater Moncton area, and on New Brunswick as a whole has been benefited a lot from a huge attraction of immigrants that drove a lot of economic growth into municipalities, I would say, as a whole. We are looking eventually to grow the population to 100,000 closely in the next 10 years, and I very much look forward to discussing with the Premier the challenges that he talked about this evening. Could it be health and access to labor for nurses, doctors, and support worker? Could it be affordable housing? Could it be inclusive education and diversity at municipal councils and also the legislature?
Is there something new we could try that would surprise people and have greater results?
Well, reserves are definitely there. Immigration is definitely an economic driver. If you look at the numbers when it comes to the economic growth, it's millions of dollars of contribution when it comes to immigrants being here, getting jobs, paying taxes, and definitely contributing. Part of that solution the Premier is talking about when it comes to keeping the taxes low is definitely attached to immigration, because the more contribution we have of people to the fiscal, revenue and situation of the province, it means that we can afford as a collective to keep those taxes down. So we need more people contributing. It's definitely something that affects all regions, not just the urban areas. When we talk about hospitals, we also talk about access to definitely labor when it comes to nurses and labor and support workers. And we need to make sure that we're attracting the best talent, but also we need to make sure that we tackle the matter of retention to make sure that every single talent that we spend a lot of effort at attracting this province stays after 5 years.
Who provides the tools to make those policies happen? Is it the public sector? Is it the private sector?
It's definitely a joint collaboration. We have been working with the government of New Brunswick collaboratively, very closely to work on the population growth strategy, and a lot of the recommendations that we worked on from the New Brunswick Multicultural Council, we have seen them in the population growth strategy. We have developed ways that we can work on it together. Again, it's very much issues like affordable housing for immigrants, access to healthcare and services, making sure that we do discuss inclusive education and what it looks like, knowing that a lot of people will be at a table from a different culture, and we need to equip teachers and nurses and doctors with the proper knowledge when it comes to intercultural understanding, so we can all work in the same vision to make sure that this province is equal for everyone and has equal opportunities for all.
And how would you anticipate that initiative would be responded to by the government?
I would say very much positive. The Premier is definitely a numbers guy. He is a process person. He looks definitely into the future and making sure that we do make sure that the economic growth takes care of everyone around the table. He's been talking about New Brunswick, where everyone can contribute to, and those solutions can come definitely from the ground. We have been working in the ground for more than 35 years, looking for ways that we can make New Brunswick not just a prosperous place from the economic perspective, but where social and cohesion is definitely a way to live, where there is cultural understanding, where we talk about discrimination in a way that it's not a problem no more. We understand each other, and it's definitely a way for all of us to connect and make sure that we all work together to make sure this province remains the best place to live for all New Brunswickers.
Mr. Laquas, I just want to thank you for your patience. I don't know how many people would know that you've been sitting in that chair for the greater part of an hour waiting for a chance to speak. So I thank you for being so patient, and thanks for giving us your time tonight.
It's a pleasure. My pleasure, and thanks for having me tonight.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Monsef Laquas, president of the New Brunswick Multicultural Council. Back to you, Harry.
That was kind of an apology for me eating up all the airtime, was it, Terry?
That wasn't how it was meant to be.
All right. Thanks very much, Terry. It was a great interview. A statement from the Prime Minister of Canada on the results of tonight's election. I just want to read you a couple of paragraphs. Justin Trudeau says, on behalf of the Government of Canada, I congratulate Blaine Higgs on his re-election as Premier. He says, I look forward to working closely with the provincial government as we recover from the global COVID-19 pandemic. Together, we will continue to safely restart the economy and lay the groundwork to keep New Brunswick communities strong and healthy through investments under the Safe Restart Agreement, continued partnership in the Atlantic Growth Strategy, and ongoing work on clean energy and electrification. We will build a more resilient economy in the province and a Canada that is healthier and safer, cleaner and more competitive, and fairer and more inclusive. That a message from the Prime Minister to Blaine Higgs on this evening of victory for the Progressive Conservatives. Let's bring Eric Grenier back in. Eric's been watching the progress of the evening from Ottawa, and so there's kind of a token of let's work together from the Prime Minister. What was your assessment of the relationship Blaine Higgs enjoyed with Justin Trudeau, if there was such a relationship, and where that will go now?
Well, I think it's generally been one of the better ones that we've seen between the federal and the provincial governments, particularly compared to other Conservative premiers. The Blaine Higgs government was not seen as one that was particularly problematic or troublesome for Justin Trudeau's Liberals. And during the pandemic, the Liberals were having very good relations with every province, every provincial premier. So presumably that will continue as this pandemic goes on. So I don't think that will change, but I think that Justin Trudeau will be eyeing the results tonight with an eye more to that pandemic and the impact on the vote. I know that he won't be the only governing leader to be wondering what would happen if there was an election in the midst of a pandemic. New Brunswick, not necessarily a good case for every other province, because cases remain very, very low in New Brunswick compared to record cases, or at least in the last few months in other parts of the country. But certainly, I think that a lot of people in Ottawa will be watching to see what else is going to happen out of this, and whether New Brunswick will be the last minority government to fall, and to try to go to the polls and see if voters want to reward governments who have governed during this pandemic.
Well, you know, Eric, not to make too fine a point of it, but there is a view in New Brunswick that we have illustrated how provinces should deal with the COVID-19 in managing it and managing that health crisis. So I think New Brunswick is feeling pretty good about that. Now, is there a lesson to be taught as well for how you go from a minority government to a majority government?
Well, you have to make sure that voters don't think that the election is an unnecessary one, and it's clear from the results tonight that for a lot of New Brunswickers, just giving the PCs those extra seats to give them a majority was the good thing to do.
So is this going to be the conversation, in the hallways of Parliament tomorrow?
I think so. I think there will be a little bit of conversation about that. Certainly not the only capital across the country will having that conversation, and maybe a little bit of the conversation that you're having earlier, whether any of those Liberal MPs or former Liberal MPs might be eyeing that leadership and wondering if they'd like to practice politics a little closer to home.
I have a funny feeling we'll be talking more with you over the coming days, Eric. Listen, it's been great having you on the program. Thank you so much for your insight and your guidance through this campaign. It's been really helpful, and thank you for your help tonight.
All right, thanks.
All right, take care. Eric Grenier, CBC's polls analyst in Ottawa, joining us from there. So we were talking earlier about the number of women who have won their ridings. Blaine Higgs has 9 women in his caucus to choose from for cabinet positions. Rachel, this is, some progress looking at the number of women elected. Here's the board. So 14 in total.
So that is a new record for and in counterintuitive for the short time period that we had. And that's very interesting. That'll be because we didn't have the same kind of, we had a push, but we've had 50% women campaigns that have been more active in previous years. Maybe they built the ground to get us here. It'll be interesting to talk more about why we got this result tonight.
So we had 9 PC women elected.
That's right. 3 Liberals,
and
one with the Alliance and one with the Greens. I mean, the Liberals who, Brian Gallant made advancing women such a cornerstone of his government's policy and approach, but it's the PCs really who have done it, and the Liberals have actually lost a couple of women MLAs tonight. So, and that's a chance for the PCs to continue to rebrand themselves and evolve into a party that maybe can become the party of women voters to some extent, if they see themselves reflected.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's have a look at the total vote tonight. So 65.9%. Not great, but not bad. The low point, I think, was 2014. We had 64.6%. So we certainly did better than that in terms of voter turnout.
Well, especially voter turnout in some elections, New Brunswick, just not being able to pull off the logistics, for example, for they had polling stations on 18 post-secondary institutions in 2018. Yeah. They were building the student vote. They couldn't do that this year. They couldn't do seniors' homes in the same way. But they sure saw, if you heard Kim Poffenroth, the chief electoral officer, this afternoon talking about this huge demand for mail-in ballots. And special ballots, and you could vote every day at the returning office. You know that Elections New Brunswick has got to rethink how it does this.
Yeah. But I know some people with the parties were expecting much lower turnout, a bigger drop from last time. So that is actually quite a small drop, and in the context, perhaps a modest success.
I think the important thing there too is to see the Green Party as the third party in the province, displacing the NDP long ago, but the People's Alliance as well.
That's right.
I think this is a tremendous success for Elections New Brunswick. I mean, they are confined by legislation. There is only so much change they can make. They were on standby. Still, there was a rush to get people in place and actual physical locations set up, and again,
just nervousness,
and to promote that get out the vote, meant that people had to be in place more often. It's got to have been a grueling period for them.
Let's take a look at Fredericton North for the obvious reason that another party leader was here, and that was Mackenzie Thomas, and he got 100 votes. Through this campaign, he's been one of the more entertaining characters, for his skill, he's well-spoken, and his determination to take that party, which is so hobbled right now, and lead it into this election.
To get 33 candidates out of the air at 23 years old, while also working night shifts at a Fredericton hotel. I mean, and to be so poised.
Everybody likes him. He'd be a heck of a candidate for another party.
Yeah. It would be interesting to see some numbers on younger people who campaigned for the parties. I think of St. John.
In the polling, we did see a real disparity where young voters were going compared to older voters. And yes, the NDP had that youthful energy, and some of those candidates in St. John And we could go through the ridings and look at the percentage of the vote they got. But I think there's going to be a discussion. They're still putting off that discussion, I think, about what happens on the left and how many ways that vote can split.
Yeah. Interesting to think about what future there might be for the Green Party as well. As Blaine Higgs busies himself in the legislature, one could presume that party functionaries are going to go out and try to deepen that vote that we saw tonight that was widely spread but very shallow.
Well, I don't think the climate change crisis is going away.
Yes.
We were just so busy with other stuff. We weren't talking about it anywhere the way we were. It was a huge issue in 2018. And you've got the federal party firing up, going into a leadership convention. They've got 8 candidates vying for the job to replace Elizabeth May. You had Joanne Roberts, the interim leader, coming into New Brunswick, a recognized personality here, making her presence known. I think the Green has things to come.
Yes.
Future of the People's Alliance?
Well, if they'd gone down to 1, let's say it had only been Chris Austin, I think it might have become. But and it last time would have been a flash in the pan. 2 makes a huge difference. I mean, it's not 3, but they will be there. They'll be there for 4 years. They don't have to worry about an election for 4 years now either. And that Chris Austin built that party pretty much by himself, and it is now hung in, and he can start to think maybe about where he wants to go with the party.
Longevity beyond his leadership will be the question.
I mean, we don't tend to elect minority governments in New Brunswick, so that can't be his only strategy and his only message going forward into the next cycle 4 years from now. He's going to need to rethink how can he be different than the PC party, which he was aligned with in the legislature.
Well, it has been quite a night. We promised history, and history was made. And I thank you, Rachel Cave, and you, Jacques Poitras, for helping us through that. It has been quite a night. Blaine Higgs, the next Premier government that we've seen in the first time we've seen that happen in 17 years, and going forward there will be lots to report on. So thank you both for joining us tonight. Thank you to Terry Segay as well, and thank you for joining us tonight. Tomorrow we'll have full coverage of the election aftermath on cbc.ca/nb, your local CBC Radio morning show, of course, and later in the day with CBC Radio's Shift, and of course with me on CBC Television's News for New Brunswick at 6 o'clock. Thanks to Rachel Cave and Jacques Poitras, Terry Segay, and our field reporters, and of course thank you to the team of producers and technicians who made tonight possible. For viewers on CBC TV, we're joining Hockey in Progress, and for viewers on News Network, The National is up next. For radio listeners, network programming continues. Good night, and thank you for joining us.
Both going to the